Hey there, and welcome to another episode of The Bible. Wait, what? Yes, this is the podcast that unravels the mysteries of the Bible's most perplexing, puzzling, and thought-provoking passages. My name is Rohan, and each session I'm joined by a member of our team at C3 Church Camden, Picton and Thirroul as they quiz me on some of the more complicated, confusing, challenging, and even confronting passages that we read in our weekly Bible reading plan. We understand that reading the Bible can be a challenging and perplexing experience. Many people just don't know where to start, they get confused, and so they give up. Well, that's why this podcast exists, to equip you with the tools and the knowledge to explore the richness and depth of the Bible for yourself. So grab your Bible, take a deep breath, and join us as we explore this week's passages. To learn more about us or to get in touch with us at C3 Church Camden, Picton and Thirroul, visit any of our 3 locations' websites. That's c3camden.church, c3picton.church and c3thirroul.church. Or you can follow us on Facebook, Instagram and YouTube just by searching for any of our locations' names. So without any further delay, let's dive into today's conversation.
Hello. Welcome again to this podcast. What's it called, Pastor Rohan?
The Bible, wait, what?
Oh, I love how you say that, particularly the wait bit.
The wait, like it's quick.
Yeah.
So should it be the Bible, wait, what?
More like that.
Okay.
Yes. Either way, it's good.
Either way works.
Yeah.
Do you ever have wait, what moments in the Bible? I do.
I do. I have them a lot in life
Regularly.
too.
In life as well. Yeah,
Yes.
This is true. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, my name's Jeanie, by the way.
Yes, hello everyone. My name's Rohan, by the way.
Yeah. Gee, we're off to a good start, aren't we?
We are, yeah. We actually are re-recording our intro because I forgot to press unmute.
Forgot, yes.
So this is intro take 2.
Intro take 2.
It's less natural second time around.
Second time. So I will tell you that we are going through Mark chapters 11 to 15 on this podcast. And I am also going to say that particularly chapter 14 has a lot of verses, 70-something verses. So I'm going to read a lot less this time around.
Yep,
Hopefully,
everyone's very excited about that.
Yes, to crack down on the time.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we're gonna be fine. This will be under 2 hours today.
Yeah, one would hope.
Sure, we'll see.
One would hope. Yes, I do like talking about the Bible though.
Yeah.
And it's nice to sit down and have this conversation with somebody because most people just are not interested.
Really? Most people aren't interested.
No, they're not interested.
Well, that's what this podcast exists for, to help people get interested in talking about the Bible and learning it and not just having their eyes glaze over at the confusing stuff. So hopefully we can do that for you today, listeners.
That's the plan, but my eyes glazed over when Rohan was saying what he was just saying. So
we're off to a really good start.
Yeah, let's see how this goes.
All right.
Yes, and I will tell you, if you haven't watched or listened to the last 2 podcasts, I'm reading from the Message.
That's right, you are too.
Yes, because I've never liked the Message. Mm-hmm. I'm also doing the Book of Mark because I've never liked the Book of Mark.
So you're throwing yourself in the deep end. You're diving into the conversation like we say in our intro. Yep.
Yep. And reasons behind this, I have struggled to know who Jesus is. I've struggled to find his character and to feel I have more questions about Jesus than I have gotten answers.
Okay.
And I was very surprised that halfway through this Book of Mark, I found that John Mark, the author, it's not one of the disciples writing this book, he actually asked the same question. Who is this man? Yeah. And a couple of times, I think. Or maybe I've just written notes.
Oh, no, it is. It's that's the theme of the book all the way through. The question is coming up time. Who is this man? Who is this man? Who is this man? And, we're going to see that answered.
Yeah. And so far.
Today, I think.
Today, I hope so.
If it all goes well.
We've seen him portrayed as a miracle worker, a healer, a teacher, and anything else?
In this, yes, I was going to say teacher. He doesn't do a lot of teaching in Mark, but it is there. Yeah. A rabbi. Yeah, that's a teacher. That'll do. Yep.
Okay. Well, let's dive into chapter 11.
Chapter 11. We're going to go there. All right, here we go.
This This is the chapter when Jesus enters Jerusalem on a colt. Can you explain to me the significance of a colt? Not a cult, but why a colt?
COLT, is it?
And some people say, yes, some
Not
people call it a
CULT.
donkey.
A donkey.
COLT.
So it's, you got me now. Isn't it a foal? A colt is a young donkey. Is that correct? Do you know?
Colt is a young horse.
A young horse.
I don't know what a
It
young
says
donkey
colt,
is.
a foal of a donkey. Well, there's a couple of things about it. Oftentimes,
It's a young male horse.
A young
colt.
male horse. Okay, right. So it's not a war stallion. Let's put it that way. So
Interesting you say that.
Yeah. Why is it interesting I say that?
Well, because wouldn't a Messiah who was coming to lead the military and take over and conquer Jerusalem and set up its new government or kingship or whatever be riding an amazing wild stallion?
Yes, that's how the Roman emperors did it, I think. So there's two schools of thought, and I'm gonna say I'm not fresh on which one is historically accurate. But anyway, there's one school of thought that is quite common for military leaders they would be riding a stallion, a war stallion, something that produces power and sends that message of power. And Jesus obviously is not coming representing himself in that way. He's coming as a lowly shepherd king. So hence that's part of why he's on a much tamer beast than the stallion. However, somewhere in the back of my mind, there is this thought that I've heard talked about, and I'm not going to I can't verify this now, but that sometimes there was the odd instance where a military leader would ride in on a like a foal or something like that, and the idea was that that was their way of showing that they have conquered, and now I don't need to conquer you anymore. So I'm safe on this small horse. I'm not threatened, and you don't need to be. It's sort of political propaganda. You don't need to be threatened by me. Look, I'm not like that. But that comes. My understanding is that comes after they've already done the military conquest. So now they're trying to present themselves as the good guys. Don't be afraid of us. We just completely obliterated your army, but don't be afraid of us now. Either way, the message of Jesus doing it is different. One, he is not presenting himself as the military king. One, he's not even trying to throw out the military occupiers, the Romans. He is presenting himself to the Jews as king of the Jews, and he's trying to present this message of simplicity, humility, lowliness, etc.
It also says this colt had never been ridden.
Mm.
Any ideas on the
No, but
significance on that?
I don't doubt that you do. Because you've done the research. What can you illuminate?
No, I actually don't
know.
No, I just thought it was one thing that I thought I would ask you and not bother to look at just to test you.
Yeah, no, I don't.
Never yet been ridden.
I don't retain this level of information. I'm sure that I know in the past when I've done Palm Sunday messages, I have researched all of this, but this is the sort of stuff that sometimes you retain it, sometimes you don't. You've got to go back and refresh it prior to Palm Sunday. Because we're watching this, we'll be listening to this. It'll probably be around Palm Sunday.
Right. Well, it's got to be something about the fact this is it's not broken in, but
it's not broken in. It's a wild.
Jesus was able to tame the beast.
Okay. Boom.
The beast
like
offered itself, the creation, the created.
Okay.
Yeah, offered
There's
itself.
some significance there. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. I would like to know what the no doubt's been talked about during church history.
Not bridled either.
No, it's not. It's definitely not tamed.
No, so this cult is actually leading Jesus where Jesus wants to go without Jesus telling it where to go because he's not controlling it.
He's not bridled it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
It's a strange thing. Yeah.
Yeah. It is a significant. We don't see it in this gospel, but in one of the other gospels, we do see this being the author tells us that this is a fulfillment of the prophecy of Zechariah. See, your king comes to you, lowly and riding on a donkey, on the foal. Was it a colt, the foal of a donkey or something? It's a prophetic declaration of the Messiah, and the Jews and the Jewish leaders knew that, no question about it.
Okay, so add to this. This is Passover.
This is coming into Passover festival.
Yeah, all right. So Jesus is going, Passover is the biggest festival of the year. People have come to the temple and he is arriving there on this prophesized colt.
Yep.
And everyone's excited.
Everyone is excited except the religious elite. Yes.
Except for those guys. But people are paving way for him to go through. They're putting down their coats and this one says little trees, I think. but
Little trees.
yeah, something like that.
Variety of different kinds of trees that they would find. Often it's the same trees they would use in the festival of
rushes, spreading out rushes. Sorry,
Oh, that's very.
Yeah,
it's
they had
good on
cut
you, G. Peterson.
in the fields.
Yeah.
And
So-
people. Sorry, go on.
No, I was going to say, palm trees, different kinds of trees from around. The same ones they would use in the Feast of Tabernacles to build the roofs over their huts and things in
Right.
Jerusalem. Yeah.
And imagine the disciples here. Jesus had said to these guys, "Go find this colt. The master will just give it to you," and that happened.
Mhm.
And he's riding this. He's going in, and people are paving the way.
Yep.
They're all excited. They would have
What an
thought, "This is the moment."
This is the moment. And many of them no doubt thought that this was the moment when the Messiah was coming back to free us from our oppression. Yep. That was the whole excitement around this. We're free. We're free.
We're free.
It's an incredible sight. And, you've been there too, but to be on the Mount of Olives and just, it's so vivid to be able to think of what they would have seen as they came across the crest of the hill there and made their way down the mountain and up into the Temple Mount area. It's just, it's quite a serene experience, isn't it?
Wonder how Jesus was feeling riding this.
Mm.
And, it's fascinating because he walks with them everywhere.
Yeah.
So when he said, "Go get this colt," they would have gone, "Oh,
This is
this is
intentional.
different."
Yep. That's right.
Intentional. So he's riding in and they're calling out, "Hosanna, blessed is he who comes in God's name. Blessed the kingdom coming of our father David. Hosanna in the highest heaven." He entered Jerusalem. This is the part I do want to read in verse 11. He entered Jerusalem, then entered the temple. He looked around, taking it all in. But by now it was late.
So he left.
He went back to Bethany with the 12. I mean, what a letdown.
Yeah, exactly. They were expecting this big coup.
Yeah.
And he just goes, "Right, I'm going home now."
He goes in,
Crosses over the Mount of Olives, back
Yeah.
up the hill and over into Bethany.
just looks around, doesn't say anything. All these people there screaming, "Hosanna, Hosanna," and then nothing.
Nothing.
He just leaves.
According to Mark, I should
According
add.
to Mark.
According to Mark. So this is a good example. Let's park on this for a moment. This is a good example of how the gospel accounts don't always line up perfectly. Now, whether or not...
What?
Did you know that?
What do you mean?
Well, according to other gospels, Jesus went into Jerusalem, had a bit of a song and dance, said a few words to the Pharisees, went into the temple, found that they were buying and selling and overturned
hang
the money
on.
changes, and
He does this too, but the next day.
the next day.
The
That's
next
right.
day.
He does. But this account, other gospels say he does it on the moment. So, you're reflecting on this years later and you're writing this, whether it was the same day or the next day, you're going to remember the event. So so our listeners understand that, just because the gospels don't necessarily seem to align perfectly does not invalidate them. And I know we've talked about this on the podcast. In fact, quite the opposite. If you had 4 stories that were all perfectly aligned, then you'd know they were fabricated. Investigators, authorities, courts, they all know that. So this space here for freedom of expression and telling the story in different ways. And they're not as worried about the logistics of the chronological order of things as you would be in a court of law where you need to figure everything out. They're not doing that.
I understand what you're saying, but that line that I just read to you, walks into the temple,
Looks around.
goes home. That is so reflective of the feelings, of the emotions rather, of the disciples at the time.
Yeah.
So they would have remembered it like that because there's this big moment,
Big
this
anticipation.
jubilation,
Yep.
which just falls flat.
Yep.
So regardless of if it was straight after or the next day, that feeling of,
This isn't what we expected.
nothing happened.
Yeah.
Not what we were expecting.
Yep.
The Messiah, they were still hoping he was going to be the Messiah that they thought he was going to be.
Yep.
It all just falls flat.
Even though he had told them
Yeah,
that
he had
wasn't
told
going
them.
to be.
They still don't see him. They only
Yep.
see him partially.
Yep, that's right. He's still at this moment where they go, "Who is this man?" Yeah,
Who
they
is
still
he?
don't really get what he's about. They didn't know, to use Michael W. Smith's words, they didn't know his secret ambition.
No, they
It's a
didn't.
great song.
Yeah.
Nobody knew his secret ambition. Nobody knew his claim to fame.
I don't actually know that song.
He broke the old rules steeped in tradition.
See, you blame me for going on too
Yeah,
long
okay,
on here, but
move it.
now are you going to
Okay.
start singing?
I'm going to cut. No, I'm not going to sing it. Not the way Mike W. Smith
Should I
sings
start
it.
playing drums or something?
No. So, okay, yes, you're right. There would have been this letdown.
Let down.
Yeah, and I think the narrative wants you to pick up on that later on in the narrative when Jesus is about going to be crucified, because 3, 4, 5 days before they're marching into Jerusalem expecting a military ruler, and they're overthrown. They're disappointed. When
They would be.
'cause these are the
disappointed
same
now
people.
too.
These are the same people who are going to be in the crowd and say, "Crucify him, crucify him."
And these are the same people that just before entering Jerusalem and the Passover are asking who's going to be next to you, who's going to be number 1 and
Yes,
2
yep.
in your kingdom. And then he gets on the donkey and it's like, I'm going to be number 1, number 2 for sure. And then bum, bum.
Nothing happens,
Nothing happens.
supposedly.
Yes.
Yep,
All
that's
right.
right.
But in this account of Mark, the next day, this is the little bit called the cursed fig tree. And last week we were talking about plot points. Well, I should have really explained that as set up and payoff.
Okay.
In the way Mark, he sets up something like movies will set up something like if you see a gun,
Yep.
right? That's the setup. Eventually that gun has to be used.
It's going to come up in the plot
story.
somewhere. Yep.
Yeah. Okay. So here we have a setup. I'm just going to read this.
So the
It's
fig
really
tree is the setup, you're
The
saying?
fig tree is
okay.
the setup.
All right.
Yeah.
That'll help me.
Okay, as they left Bethany, and I do want to read this little bit, he was hungry, but I like to say he was hangry.
Oh, he was a bit hangry.
Hangry. Off in the distance, he sees a fig tree in full leaf. He comes up to it expecting to find something for breakfast, but he finds nothing but fig leaves. It wasn't yet the season for figs. He addressed the tree, "No one is going to eat fruit from you again, ever." And his disciples overhear him. And then they go to Jerusalem. And immediately on entering the temple, Jesus started throwing out everyone who had set up shop there, buying and selling. He kicked over the tables on the bankers. Sorry, I'm reading this at distance without glasses on. And the stalls of the pigeon merchants. He didn't let anyone even carry a basket through the temple. And then he taught them, quoting this text, My house was designated a house of prayer for the nations. You've turned it into a hangout for thieves."
Ooh, that's gentle, Jesus, not?
I see that as the best example of being hangry.
Okay.
Don't you? I mean, he was hungry and he goes in and he loses
It
himself.
certainly sounds like that, doesn't it? Except that when I think hangry, I think someone who's out of control, that doesn't have control of their emotions.
Yeah, fair enough.
I think Jesus is.
I'll give you that.
I think Jesus is well and truly in control of his emotions, and this is justified anger and justice, as opposed to self-focused anger and justice.
So what's going on here? Can you just describe what's wrong with people selling things in the temple?
Nothing's wrong with selling in the temple. That was a standard practice in and of itself. So let's just think, and they would bring their animals, those that were coming from a long way away, like Galilee. Then they're bringing a lamb to sacrifice for Passover. It's a long way to take a lamb, hundreds of kilometres to take a lamb. So the law gave provision for this, that they could actually, take the money, go to Jerusalem, buy the lamb, and then offer the lamb as a sacrifice, etc. So that was a standard practice. What was going on here was usury, which was outlawed in the law. One thing they could not do is exact and charge interest to their own people. So these money changers, bankers, were like your loan sharks of today. They were using the weak and profiting. So they were overpricing these animals. And, of course, they were obligated to give their offering. They were obligated to present their animal for offering, so they had to take whatever price they could get. And it was that using and abusing of the poor by the rich and the powerful and the elite that Jesus was having a go at. He was saying, this is not supposed to be a den of thieves, is what he said. Or did you say a bunch of robbers or something? Because that's what they were doing. They were robbing the people. And he's saying, I don't think Jesus would have had a problem if it was done fairly, but the problem was there was unbalanced scales being used here. And that's what Jesus is, just like all the prophets of old, the abuse of the weak, the vulnerable, the poor, the widow, and so on.
So it's a justified righteous anger.
It's a righteous anger. Saying? Yeah. Yeah. And you have taken what is supposed to be a godly house of prayer and you've turned it into a den of thieves. That's pretty potent language he's using there because he's angry.
So from the outside, the temple looks like a place of God, but the inside it's been turned to den of thieves, like there's decay inside.
Inside the heart,
like a rot.
Yeah, a rot, yes, a systemic rot in the structure of the temple. Not the building, but the people who represent the building.
Okay, all right. And then the high priests hear about him going bananas.
Yep. Yeah,
And-
it doesn't take long when tables get turned over
No.
and chickens are running around everywhere and
Imagine the
sheep
scene.
are everywhere. You know, that doesn't take long to get noticed, does it?
No, this one, it doesn't say he has a whip, but I know other
Yeah,
ones say he has
otherwise-
a whip. Can you imagine
John's
this is-
gospel says he went and carefully wove a whip. So
Wow.
this was not impulsive language. This was him taking his time to weave a whip and then come back and go, right, I'm clearing this place out. And part of it is literally picking a fight with the Jews intentionally. This
So
is
he-
all leading towards his crucifixion.
So he's picking a fight with the Jews and not the Romans,
yeah, this
because
is the
that's what they
Jews.
wanted. They
Yeah,
wanted the Messiah to
isn't
pick
that
the fight
incredible?
with the Romans.
Yeah, he came
Yeah.
after their own people.
And he goes in and he gets really mad. And these people, they panic when they try to get him, the high priest and stuff. They're in a panic basically because the entire crowd was carried away by his teachings. So they wanted to destroy him and get rid of him, but they couldn't because
When you've got
you
a
just couldn't take someone out like that.
no, you take someone out there, you're going to have riots on your hands.
Yeah.
And both the Romans and the Jewish authorities had that concern about Jesus all the way through. They've had that concern of he's got tremendous influence, and if we take him out, they're going to riot against us. Yeah.
And I read something that the Romans thought, and I can't remember where I read it. The Romans thought that if anything was going to happen, if anybody was going to start some insurrection, it was going to start in the temple.
Yes.
And it was going to
To
start
on
at Passover.
Yep. Yeah. In fact, that's partly why we're going to see that's partly. I assume we're seeing it in Mark's gospel. I always get conflated in my mind, but it's partly why Pilate is even there. Pilate did not spend his time in Jerusalem, even though that was the capital. He spent his time at Caesarea because it's a much nicer climate, warmer climate by the beach. But he showed up in Jerusalem because of this risk of insurrection taking place at this time.
And he also had a job to do as well later on. He releases somebody from prison around Passover.
Oh, yes, that's right. It's linked.
It's linked.
That's right.
Okay.
So that's part of the tradition of what is there. But they are aware of the risk of insurrection at this time, which is you get a growing crowd coming together at that time. There's a lot of unrest. You only need a few zealots in the crowd to whip the crowd up into a frenzy, and you've got all kinds of problems
And
on
the
your hands.
crowd would have loved watching him
Oh,
go in
yeah.
there, tear this down, because he was on the crowd's side.
Yeah, that's right. He was
They
on,
w-
and rightly so. He was on the crowd side because they were the ones who were being victimised by their own elites.
Yeah. Okay. This is all getting very exciting.
It is, isn't it?
So then the evening, they actually leave the city.
Mm-hmm.
And in the morning, they walk back along the road and then they see the fig tree shriveled to a dry stick. That's what it says. And Peter, remembering what had happened the previous day, said to him, "Rabbi, look, the fig tree you cursed is shriveled up."
Mm-hmm.
Now, Jesus here uses this as he becomes kind of a storyteller.
It's a teaching point, isn't
A
it?
teaching point, yeah. He was matter of fact. And he says this line in the message, which is a strange way to say it. You'll have to explain it to me. Embrace this God life. Really embrace it, and nothing will be too much for you. Huh? Wait, what?
That's the way it was, isn't it?
Embrace the God life? What is that? And this mountain, for instance, just say, go jump in the lake. And no shuffling or shilly-shallying. And it's as good as go jump in the lake.
Don't shuffle or shilly-shally on your way.
That's right, yeah. And then Jesus says, that's why I urge you to pray for absolutely everything, ranging from small to large, include everything as you embrace this God life, and you'll get everything, you'll get God's everything.
You're asking what's the context of all of that?
What's a God life?
Okay. Well, the God life is one that follows the law. That's obviously his translation. He would have got it from somewhere in the original Greek, but this version says have faith in God, which is what most of the others say. So it's talking about this faith life where God is the center of our world. Have faith in God. Now that's we can go into a whole sermon topic on what that means to have faith in God, and I think probably the reason Eugene Peterson has chosen words like embrace the God life is he's trying to deliberately force us outside of the subconscious 21st century mindset we would have when we just think have faith in God. Oh, that's just about praying for something and seeing it happen. And I wonder if he's trying to explain that, no, the text has more to it than just praying for something and seeing it happen.
Oh.
So it's holistic.
Holistic.
A holistic life that is honouring of God, that is in partnership with God, that is in intimate relationship with God, etc.
A life that's alive on the inside for God, connected to God, a life lived in prayer.
Yeah.
A
which
life.
is what he's just rebuked them for in the temple the day before. Yeah.
A life that would suggest that if you lived like that, you would look from the outside like you were, I don't know,
Flourishing,
green, fruit-filled.
fruitful. Interesting.
Yeah.
Do you think he's drawing a parallel there?
Oh, yes.
Ah, very good.
This is where the setup and payoff.
Setup and payoff is coming. So he set up 2 days the day before.
You've
and we're getting
seen,
a payoff.
what did you see? You saw a fig tree.
That looked like
It
should have been fruitful.
It should have been fruitful. Now, my first study on this was like Jesus sort of said it seemed to be that it was out of season. It wasn't.
Yeah, other versions say that. Yep, I don't think it says it in this one.
wasn't yet the season for figs. Now, what that actually means is it wasn't yet harvest time.
Right.
So the fruit should have been on the trees.
Ah, okay. So it
Because
should have had fruit.
It should have had fruit.
Right. That
The
makes
leaves,
that makes sense.
A fig tree in full leaf.
Otherwise,
should
why would
have
Jesus
figs.
expect it to have fruit on it?
Exactly.
It should have. Okay.
Particularly because later he's going to bring this up again.
Yep.
Because I thought, Jesus doesn't even know what the harvest time is. Like he doesn't even know the seasons.
He's going to talk about the harvest shortly, isn't he?
But look how sneaky clever this is. And I have to give credit to Chris Morphew, a writer on this. He wrote a book called The Best News Ever, Your 100-Day Guide to the Gospel of Mark. It's a children's book. And I read it.
Yeah.
And I have always wondered about this.
Okay.
And he just put it so clearly, and I'm going to...
Come on, tell us.
So cleverly. Well, I'm trying to. Stop rushing me.
I'm excited too. I want to know.
I'm trying to slow it down so I don't start talking like this because I'm so excited. But so here's your fig tree, right? Jesus sees it. It should be fruit-filled.
Yep.
He goes and he discovers that there's no fruit on it. Why is there no fruit on this fig tree?
Maybe it had all been picked off, or it just hadn't produced fruit.
Okay. Well, good question. Let's say they asked that. Maybe the disciples were like, why was there no fruit on that?
Right.
And then here you go into the temple where from the outside, as I just said before, it looks like it should be a place of God. It should be full of God life. It should be full of
fruit.
Full of fruit. Yet you go in and what do you find inside? Rot and disease.
Mm-hmm.
We already said that.
Yep.
I actually seeded that word in there before.
Did you?
I said rot.
Rot. Yes.
So the temple is actually
You did your
rotting.
own plot point.
Rotting from the inside.
Yep.
And if you're rotting from the inside, you're actually not able to produce any fruit.
Mm-hmm.
There is a disease that is taking over the temple life.
Yep.
Can you see
it.
the
It's
picture
brilliant.
now?
I'm tracking with you. Yeah.
And so in case the disciples didn't get it,
He
they
illustrated it.
he goes and shows you how rotted it is inside, and then they go back and see the tree, and now you see a tree that is not living the God life, that has been rotted from the inside.
From the roots up,
From the roots up with disease.
That's really good. Can I take it one little step further? You mentioned the temple.
Yes.
There is direct significance here to Israel as a nation, not recognizing their Messiah. The fig tree is a symbol of Israel. So Jesus has just walked in expecting what he should have seen was the temple representing the heart of Israel, being a place that honored God.
Yep.
So this is not just talking about the temple, it's talking about the people representing Israel who have failed at their mission, which was to be a source of light and kingdom and be a kingdom of priests to the world. They'd failed at that. And so this is directly reprimanding Israel.
And take it even one step further.
Come on, bring it further.
How does a nation or a person save itself from inner rot?
How do you save yourself from inner rot?
A disease.
I don't know that you can.
Exactly.
You can't.
You can't.
You need, once it's in there, you need some external treatment in order to be able to save yourself.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yes.
And that's what Jesus is going to do.
Yeah. Look how clever that is.
That's brilliant.
From verse 12 to verse 25, you think it's a surface level sort of story.
It's random story, but deep meaning.
Because you wonder, what the heck is the fig tree doing there?
Yeah, it's a random story to throw in the middle of all of this. Isn't it?
And then later on, Jesus reminds them, he mentions the fig tree again.
Mm.
He gets them to remember seeing what that disease is.
Yep.
And how they need the Savior.
Yeah, and I think, because in another version, his curse is something like, may no one ever eat fruit from you again.
Yes.
So that is a direct rebuke of Israel. You guys have missed it. Yeah.
Missed it. Oh, man, it's getting scary.
Mm.
That's what happened. Look at that. So I have a lot of respect, healthy respect for...
You like Mark?
I don't know about that yet, but I am very impressed with that.
Yes. It's
And I want to
clever bit of
thank
storytelling.
Chris Morphew again for
Well done, Chris.
his insight on that, but opened all the doors for me.
Well done. That's great.
Yeah. And see, keep going. No, we'll just keep going. Verse 27. And then the next part is they're Pharisees. I was going to say the Philistines. The Pharisees come back and they basically want to know Jesus' credentials. Like, who authorized you to speak and act like this?
Does it say Pharisees?
No, it doesn't.
No,
It's high priests, religion
these
scholars.
aren't the Pharisees. These are the Sadducees.
Sadducees.
So this is the ruling elite. The Pharisees are the ordinary, everyday kind of people. These are the priests. These are the rich, famous ones that are in league with the Romans to get their own, profiting off their own people, etc.
All right. I'm glad you said that because this one doesn't differentiate between high priests, religious scholars, and leaders.
Yeah, this version says the leading priests and teachers of religious law.
Yeah.
So it's more likely we throw them all together, but the Pharisees and the Sadducees are two different sects, and they didn't particularly always like each other. They had some things in common and some things they didn't. But these are the Pharisees get a pretty bad rap, but these guys are the worst of the worst. These are the ones who execute Jesus. These are the ones. Spoiler alert! In case you didn't know, Jesus is about to be executed. I just realized.
What?
Yeah, exactly. I just realized that we hadn't made that clear, had we? but these are the ones that are doing that.
All right. Okay. See, I usually read two translations, but I have decided just to stick
to the message.
Yeah,
that's why I was asking you who are we talking about here?
Say.
Yeah, no, because you mentioned Pharisees, and I just wanted to clarify these aren't the Pharisees.
All right, thank you for that. Okay, so Jesus responds. Well, they say, "Who authorized you to speak like this?" And Jesus says, "Let me ask you a question about the baptism of John. If you answer, I'll tell you my credentials." And they say, and Jesus asks, "Who authorized the baptisms? Was it heaven or humans?"
Oh, nice way to put it.
Tell me. And they were on the spot, and they knew it. And they pulled back into a huddle and they whispered, "If we say heaven, he'll ask us why we didn't believe John. And if we say human, we'll be up against it with the people because they all hold John up as a prophet." So they just decided to concede that round to Jesus. "And we don't know," they said. And then Jesus replied, "Then I won't answer your question either."
Clever.
He is
On
clever.
Jesus' part, that's really clever.
Why do you think he's clever?
Exactly what's going to happen there, because they know exactly what Mark makes it clear, that he was forcing them into a corner where he wasn't obligating himself to them, because they were trying to force his hand, and they'll see this. They're constantly trying to trap him in what he says because they want to remember he's got the crowds behind him. So if you're the religious elite and you're used to having the crowds at your beck and call and using them for your purposes, and suddenly along comes some young upstart from Galilee who's sweeping the crowd to yourself, and you know that you can't necessarily kill him easily, what else can you do? Oh, I can discredit him. I can let them see the duplicity, the error, let the crowd see the error of his ways. So they're constantly trying to trap him. And Jesus is just going, "You guys, I'm not falling for your little tricks here. If you're not prepared to be honest about what you think, I'm not going to be honest about what I think." So I just think his way of doing that in front of the crowds is a fascinating picture, because I might see Jesus doing it with a bit of a smirk on his face.
Yeah.
Yes, you have to say, "Oh, well, tell you what, you tell me and I'll tell you."
Yeah.
And they go, "Oh, we can't do it." And the reason they can't, brilliant question, because exactly what's described there. If they had have said, "Oh, well, it was from John," then everyone would go, "Well, you're the guys are the ones who it was from God, then you guys should have believed him." And if they say same thing again, if they say it's from it's not from God, the crowd are going to riot. So they're stuck.
They're stuck.
They're stuck. Jesus made them stuck, but all it did was probably elevate their antagonism towards him further. And I think it's important to realize that the way many of the Gospels, I know John's Gospel does this, Mark's Gospel does this, and I think Luke's Gospel at least does this too, is that in this final week, Jesus is deliberately trying to stimulate. It's written like he's trying to stimulate them because he wants to bring them to the point.
Stimulate or aggravate?
Aggravate, maybe is a better word. Yeah, he wants to agitate.
I see he's walked into a hornet's nest.
He has, and he's deliberately stirring the hornet's nest. He's not trying to bring peace to it here. And partly that's because he knows that his ultimate purpose is going to be fulfilled through his death on the cross. But also, too, because it's kind of like, I think of it, we're going to see this when we do the Revelation conversation in a month or so. It's like he's deliberately allowing their sin to rise to the surface so that it can be rightly judged. So it's forcing them to bring what's in their heart to the surface so that all can see it. And then it's like God is justified in judging it. because it's fully exposed. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. I hadn't really thought about it like that.
Yeah. So I heard him say, he's basically, for want of a better term, picking a fight with them.
Yeah.
But
So who is this man?
Who is this man who's doing this? Yeah.
Yeah, picking a fight. Also kind at times. And the part about praying there.
Yeah.
He's urging people to pray. He keeps changing.
He seems to be changing. He's multifaceted, isn't he?
He's multifaceted. That's a better way to put it. Let's go to chapter 12 because there's a lot to talk about there.
Chapter 12. All right.
Chapter 12, we have the story about a vineyard or vineyard.
A vineyard. That's exactly what it says.
No. Yeah, so, the first verse here says, then Jesus started telling them stories.
Okay, we've not seen a lot of Jesus teaching, only a chapter or two here and there.
No, with stories. Gospel. Yeah, this is a big pause when he says this amazing story about a man planting a vineyard. I'm going to always say it as a vineyard. And he fenced it, dug a wine press, and he made it pretty much amazing. Then he goes off on a field trip and he hires people to look after it. Mm-hmm. And then they stop paying the bills and stuff, right?
Yep.
And so he sends people to he sends a first person to collect the rent.
Yep.
And they grabbed him and they beat him up and they sent him off empty-handed. So then he sends another servant. This is in 3-5, verses 3-5. And that one they tarred and feathered.
Ooh, tarred and feathered.
That's what it says, tarred and feathered.
Must have been a medieval thing, was it?
Yeah, I guess so.
Dip him in tar and
that is
then put him in
medieval.
feathers. It sounds like a medieval torture, doesn't it? Yeah.
It is, yeah.
Yeah.
Why did he pick that?
Yeah.
Anyway, it's very graphic,
I've never heard that term, but Eugene, maybe it was a medieval thing.
Yeah, he sent another one, and that one they killed, and on, many others. Some they beat up, some they killed. And in verse 6, finally there was one left, a beloved son. In a last-ditch effort, he sent him, thinking, surely they'll respect my son. But those farmhands, they saw their chance. They rubbed their hands together in greed and said, this is the heir. Let's kill him and have it all for ourselves. I actually thought I should read it as hair. This is the
This is the hair.
Yeah. They grabbed him, killed him, and threw him over the fence. And what do you think the owner of that vineyard will do? He'll come and clean house.
Yes.
Didn't Jesus just clean the temple?
He just cleaned the house, yeah.
He cleaned the house.
Yep.
Because these people have been doing the bad things.
Isn't it interesting? Jesus is mixing the metaphors. On one hand, he's saying he's the son who's coming. And in the same sentence, he's just cleansed house. So he's the father who's come.
He's the same guy.
He's the same guy. Yeah, he's representing
with power and authority.
Representing the owner
both.
of the vineyard and the son of the owner of the vineyard.
Then he'll assign the care. So he gets rid of those guys, assign the care of the vineyard to the others, and then read it for yourselves in Scripture.
Yes,
so Jesus
exactly
points
he points back to the Bible
as explanation for himself ultimately. And the stone that the masons threw out is now the cornerstone. This is God's work. We rub our eyes. We can hardly believe it. They wanted to lynch him. That's what they say.
Yep.
Now, in this part here, is this the Sadducees like you were saying?
Yes. Yep.
All right. No Pharisees, Sadducees.
I'm not saying that
just
weren't
a mix,
Pharisees
maybe.
around, but this part of the narrative really is more about the Sadducees and the ruling elite. Yeah.
All right. Okay.
The priests and so on.
Okay. So they wanted to lynch him, and but they were intimidated by the public opinion, and they held back, and they knew the story was about them.
Mm.
But they couldn't see it was about Jesus, could they?
Couldn't see it was about Jesus, as in that he was the son?
Yeah.
I don't know. I've never really thought that they wouldn't have. I mean, when I think they know the story is about them, wouldn't the fact that it's about them imply that Jesus is saying, I'm the one that you're going to kill?
But at this point, why wouldn't they say blasphemy?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's not. It's just a story. It's not making any. Oh yeah, it is. If you go, it quotes Psalms, doesn't he? Which is a messianic promise. The stone the builder rejected. Maybe
Psalms 118, 22 to 23.
Yeah. So, yeah, interesting. Maybe there's a link there. There's certainly the reference, by the way, to the ones that came demanding the money. He's referring. Well, who do you think he's referring to, Jeannie, when he says that in the story? Who are the ones that the owner of the vineyard has sent that they've just flogged and beaten and killed and so on?
Well, I read it as the prophets.
That's right.
Yeah,
That's what
but
it is.
this is me reading it now with prior knowledge. But would I have felt that at the time?
Well, he says the Pharisees realised they were talking about him. Sorry, you got me saying Pharisees. The religious leaders realised, says they wanted to arrest him because he realised they were telling the story against them. So I think there's something in them. They know their Bible. They know their Old Testament. There's something in there where they realise you're saying we're the ones who killed the prophets. You're accusing us of doing that. How dare you? That they recognise that he was saying they are the wicked farmers. So I think whatever Jesus is saying and the way he's saying it, it's very obvious to them that he is taking a pretty big dig at them and accusing them of things that they did not believe they were guilty of.
So they are getting the accusation, but they might not be seeing it.
They might not specifically see
full.
Jesus as the fulfillment of what's going to happen, but Jesus is really prophesying about what's about to happen.
And I wonder if the line, they knew the story was about them, was sort of added in later on.
It's possible.
Like, oh, they had to know it was about them.
They had to know it was
so
about
they
them.
knew it was about them, whether it was actually 100% true or not.
Precisely. Whatever it did, though, that's a very valid form of commentary. Mark's just commentating and saying they knew. Maybe they did something. Maybe they said, oh, are you saying that about us? Maybe they did that. Or maybe he's just making an assumption about their understanding. But the narrative does not change, that they are upset with him. They want to kill him. So it's clear that the way Jesus has said this has shone a light on them, made them feel...
They feel convicted.
Convicted or angry or agitated, whatever the word you want to use there. But that's what's going on. And they want to kill him, but once again, there's crowds all around. And they go, we're not going to do this. We can't do this. We'll start a riot. And you need to understand, so it's worth also saying, these Sadducees, these ruling elite, which are the high priests and the family of the Hasmonean clan and dynasty and so on. Hasmoneans. Yes.
What is that?
Let me think. So,
Hasmonean.
quick little history lesson. So
Quick.
Okay. So at the time of the Maccabean revolt, which took place about 100-year period after Greek rule, where the Jews, it's in the Old Testament Apocrypha, it's not in our Bible, but it's in the Catholic Bible, 1st and 2nd Maccabees. So it was this group of guys that rose up, Jewish zealots that rose up and freed Israel from a rule by foreign powers for a period of time, until the Romans came along, basically. They had a period of independence. And then when the Romans came, there was a connection there, and Herod was he was married. So his wife, Salome, is that her name? No, that was the next wife. Can't think of her name. Herod the Great's wife was of this Hasmonean dynasty. So what happened is that the Maccabee family became the priests and the king. They ruled as both. They weren't Levites. They actually weren't from that clan, but they became the priest rulers, if you like. And that family and dynasty were ruling for a long time. And then when the Romans came along, they got into bed with the Romans and they said, well, look, give us some power. Herod the Great came along, married his wife. He married her. She was a Hasmonean from this tribe. And so these have a long history as the rich ruling elite, powerful people. And they were in relationship. They were getting kickbacks and giving kickbacks to Rome. So they would pay taxes. They would get kept in power by Rome. Rome saw it as convenient for them if they could blame them, but they could keep these people in power. They were deeply strong and influential at this particular time. That's who they are. And Jesus is coming after them because they are abusing the poor. They are they are too strong.
They love their power.
They love
want to do
their power.
everything to keep it.
And they wanted to keep it. That was the point. And so
they're plotting behind the scenes to keep it.
Absolutely. They are doing whatever they can to keep it. And they don't want a riot. So that's why the high priest will say later, we can't have a riot here. Because he'll say, if we let this, I think the high priest will say, if we let this go on, the Romans are going to come and take the whole thing out. And what he meant by that was, if the Romans come, they're going to blame us for not keeping the peace. So we're going to lose all our power and influence. So we've got to do something about Jesus. That was their whole mentality. They were trying to save their own, shall we say, what was the word, animal that came down the mountain? Was it an ass, was it? Yeah, that's what they were trying to save.
What?
Yeah, we were talking about Jesus riding into Jerusalem on an ass, weren't we?
We used the word colt.
We did, but it wasn't
donkey,
ass.
yes.
But Jesus, they were trying to save their own donkeys.
Okay. Right, okay. And that makes sense when give that backstory, why the next section happens about paying taxes to Caesar.
Yeah, they're trying everything they can to create issues.
And so you in the day when John Mark was writing this would understand all of this history,
Yep.
and know why the story of the vineyard comes right next to
The story of paying taxes to
the
Caesar.
taxes.
Yep.
Okay, so but this time it says Pharisees. They sent some Pharisees and
Supporters
followers
of Herod.
to
Yep.
bait him, to catch him, saying something incriminating. That sounds a lot like cancel culture. They came up and said, "Teacher, we know you have integrity.
They
that
want
you
to
are-
cancel him.
Yeah, you are indifferent to public opinion. Don't pander to your students and teach the way of God accurately." Tell
Flatter.
Yes. Is it lawful? Trick question. Trap here. Is it lawful to pay taxes to Caesar or not? Now, what would happen if he said, yes, it's lawful to pay taxes
If he
to
said
Caesar?
it's lawful to pay taxes to Caesar, the crowds that were on his side would have turned on him because they're expecting a Messiah who's going to destroy the Roman occupiers. And you're now saying, you're just like our elites who are on, they all know the elites are in bed with them. They're going, oh, you're just like them. So they would have turned on him.
And what if he had said no?
If he had said, no, it's not lawful, then that would give them grounds for them to be able to go back to the Romans and say, this guy is not advocating. He's a lawbreaker. You have to do something about him. And the Romans would have then been obligated to do something about it.
So what does he say?
He asks them a question. He says, why are you trying to trap me? He says, bring me a coin. Show me this coin. Here we go. Just a Roman denarius, single one day's pay, single coin. Say, whose inscription's on this? And they'll look at it and go, it's Caesar's inscription. And he says, okay then, give to Caesar what belongs to Caesar and give to God what belongs to God. And he just brilliantly, in the space of a bit of rhetoric, shuts the whole argument down.
It's shocking how much he shuts it down. I mean, it is, to use your word, brilliant.
Brilliant rhetoric.
Brilliant. Yeah.
Yep, absolutely.
But it's also showing you there is the life that you have to live,
Yep.
in the laws of the land that you live in. And then there's your God life.
Yep, that's right.
And the two exist at the
Side
same
by side.
time.
Yep. Here's why this is important. This is one of what I deem as only one of two political statements that Jesus makes in the Gospels anywhere. This is one of those.
What's the other one?
The other one is when we're going to see it probably in Mark's Gospel when he's before Pilate. Are you a king?
Yep. Yes.
Okay, we're going to come to that.
Yep.
All right. Two political statements. This political statement is so different to how I see Christians deal with politics. Many Christians deal with politics today. Because you would expect, if you listen to the way many Christians speak about politics today, that you would expect that Jesus would have been saying, let's kick the Romans out. Don't pay taxes to Caesar. They're corrupt. They're abusing us. They're controlling us. Jesus doesn't. He sweeps all that over. In one sense, he says, keep paying your taxes. So Jesus calms it down. He's quite apolitical in this way, not heavily partisan political. He's not pro-Roman. He's not pro-Jewish law. He's trying to say the two can actually live side by side. They're expecting freedom from Roman oppression. Jesus is bringing freedom from oppression, but it's a deeper oppression, and he's going to have to do that through his death. He wants to bring freedom to the whole world, not just to the people of Israel from Roman oppression.
It's like he's saying, pay your taxes, but keep praying that you don't have to.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Yeah, that's a really good way to put it. Pay your taxes, but keep praying that you don't have to. Yes, I love that. I've never thought about it quite so succinctly, but that's really good.
I'm so glad you say that.
That's
succinct. I thought it was funny, but
Yeah,
great.
No, it's accurate, and that is what we're going to see when we get to the book of Revelation. That's the statement of Revelation. How do you live in this world where there's tension? Because you don't want to get too complicit with Rome, which is called Babylon in the book of Revelation, but at the same time, you don't want to be at war with Rome all the time. So that's the tension we all live in our everyday lives when our authorities and government and cancel culture says you can and can't have certain values. Where do we and how do we exist, represent God in that world where at times we'll be asked to do things that are violating? And for many of those Jews there, they didn't want to pay their taxes. Or they would have avoided paying their taxes if they possibly could. But Jesus is going, no, you owe them, pay them.
Yeah. And as a reminder, when he says, give to God what is his, the next section is like, if you don't actually know how you should live this God life, the reminder is in these next few verses that your intimacies should be with God.
Yeah, that's right.
It's set up quite nicely.
It is brilliantly set up. It's a piece of rhetorical masterpiece, it is.
Now the message is actually defining Pharisees and Sadducees.
That's right. It's the Sadducees' turn now.
It says some Sadducees here, and then the party that denies any responsibility, any possibility of resurrection.
Mm-hmm.
They come up to him and they ask this crazy question, which is, again, designed to trap him and to make fun of him, I think.
Yeah, trying to belittle him.
Yeah, it's this question about a woman who gets married and then she is widowed and then she marries the brother, which was the law. The brother had to then marry her.
The law of levirate marriage.
Yep, then that guy dies and then she gets married to the next brother. And then so on until multiple times.
Number seven?
Seven, yes. And there's still no child. All seven, this is says the same, still no child. All seven took their turn, but no child. What a terrible phrase.
Yeah, I think by the time you get to brother number 4, you're probably thinking, do I have to marry her? It's not looking good. My older 3 brothers are gone.
Oh, dear. This poor woman. I feel for her.
Maybe finally, she was the cause of the problem.
Yeah. Hang on. Finally, she has some relief because she dies from... This is terrible. We're giving a very bad summary of this.
Yeah.
But eventually this lady passes away and the Sadducees, they say, oh, so when they are raised, when all these people are raised at the resurrection, whose wife is she?
Yeah. What's this resurrection all about?
Because all 7 were a husband and they think this is funny. I think they would have been jabbing each other in the ribs, like, let's see what this guy,
this is sarcasm.
You know, yeah, if he was able to say, give Caesar what's the Caesar and all that, so what's he going to say now?
So this whole religious sarcasm / you're an idiot, you know, that kind of mentality, it's the Sadducees that are doing this to Jesus. I've seen Christians do this with non-Christians. I've seen Christians do this with other parts of the Christian church. It's not Jesus to have this kind of snarkiness about them that these Sadducees have. So let's avoid that snarkiness. Jesus, he doesn't do that in that same way. He might come after self-righteousness, but he doesn't come after people who, how do I put it? Some people think some people are snarky and self-righteous. He'll attack that, but he won't attack ignorance and naivety, which is what they are claiming to do. So if I've got people in my world who are claiming they're right and they're just refusing to listen to everything else, there might be time for a bit of rhetoric and a bit of coming after them, but not your average naive person who doesn't know any better. That the heart of Jesus has compassion. We saw it when we talked about feeding of the 5,000. Compassion. They're harassed. They're like sheep without a shepherd. Don't get narky and snarky with those ones. Be kind to those ones.
Yeah, and you've seen that. You've seen Jesus be kind to multiple people, and here he is affronted with these people.
Yep.
And then he says to them, you're way off base, and here's why. 1, you don't know your Bibles. 2, you don't know how God works. After the dead is raised up, we're past the marriage business, as it is with angels. All our ecstasies and intimacies will then be with God. And regarding the dead, what they say, whether they are raised or not, don't you ever read the Bible? How did they miss all this? How did they come up with this idea there was no resurrection?
So they argue. So the Sadducees only held to Torah. They didn't have the prophetic books, the historical books, the Psalms, the poetic, those books. They didn't have them on the same level of authority. The Sadducees held purely to the books of Moses. And so they know that there were teaching of the afterlife and all that and the other ones, but they didn't believe those books. They only believed Torah. And they believed that Torah did not talk about the resurrection and the afterlife or anything like that in any way. Well, it didn't talk about resurrection, I should say, the resurrection of the dead, that humans would be resurrected. They didn't believe that. And yet Jesus is going to tell them from the Torah that they were in error.
So they didn't have a concept of eternity.
Now, I used to think 100%. They used to think that this meant that they just believed that, when you die, that's it. Nothing else happens. And then more recently, and I can't remember where I heard this, I'd have to research it. More recently, I heard a speaker say, might have been Bible Project or something. No, that's not what they thought. It wasn't that they didn't believe in eternal life. It's just the whole concept of bodily resurrection but they didn't
bodily.
believe him.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
So they still believed in the soul.
The soul, the
spirit
eternalness of the
being
soul, but not the bodily
continuing.
resurrection. I think, more recently, I think. And that's
Makes
sort
so
of,
much more sense.
and it does make
Yeah.
sense because that's what it says here.
Yes.
They didn't
Yeah.
believe in the resurrection.
Oh, hallelujah. That
Yeah.
makes
Yeah.
it very
But
clear.
I can't remember exactly where I heard that. But I went, that makes more sense.
So when Jesus responds to them here, is he quoting something from the Torah?
Yes.
Or, yeah. So
Yes.
he says, sorry, go on.
He says, I'm the God. This is what Yahweh, how he reveals himself to Moses. He picks the most pivotal moment in Torah for God revealing himself, when God reveals himself to Moses at the burning bush. When he just says, this is who I am. I'm Yahweh. I am the God of your father Isaac, your father Jacob, and your father Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. I am. So he uses that moment to show that Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob are still alive, ready, resurrected. That's how I understand it.
And recognizable. It implies they're
And
recognizable.
recognizable, which is this bodily resurrection mentality thing.
Look at how he messes with time here. The time implies past, present, and future.
Does.
Yeah, there's a few things, and maybe not in Mark, but other readings where you can just see the time. God has a very different view of time. Because when, I don't know if you've ever read any of N.T. Wright's stuff, where he says that when Christ died, that it was like the powers of darkness were conquered.
Yes.
But we know that won't be fulfilled, but that it is conquered, but
it's now and not yet.
Now and not yet. Yeah, there's these strange time things.
That's right.
This other world.
Yep.
And Jesus is sort of pointing to that, and you have to think, who is this guy who knows about this sort of supernatural weird stuff?
This came up in my conversation, again, about Revelation with Phil. A week ago I was recording it, and it came up about how we often take the book of Revelation to be all chronological order, and how it's not so much, we shouldn't read it as chronological order just because we're seeing things played out in the story in that way. It's all happening in the, eternal now, if you like. And then once we understand that God exists in eternity, that is a much easier and safer way to understand that it's not so much that it's all happening at once as it's all happening all the time. So throughout time, God is the victor and becoming the victor. God is king and becoming king. Jesus is dying and has died. All these events that we fit into our chronological order are all in play in the game at any given moment. So that's why Jesus can say, I am the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob.
It takes a lot to get your head around.
Yeah, it does.
You really need to wrestle with that one, to use words you often use.
Wrestle
with it, yeah. I just want to point out that bit about marriage there. When I was researching this, just the idea that you're complete with God in heaven. Like that's what he's implying, right? There's no marriage, because marriage was sort of taking place to not only complete the union, but also protection and purpose and life, continuation, birth and everything. But now it's like in heaven, complete, right?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. That's a good call.
Oh, well, thank you for that.
In heaven, we'll let the whole in heaven sit us.
Yes.
Yes.
In the new kingdom.
In the new kingdom. Yes. Let's use that language.
Ooh, she knows something there.
Yeah,
Tick,
Yep.
tick.
You've done your master's
But
course.
it's funny, isn't it? You use those words in heaven because you're
words.
so used to it. But it actually, if you read later on, friends who are listening to this will get to the point what we're talking about. In the Revelation series, there's a new kingdom.
There's a new kingdom.
Anyway.
That's right.
Okay.
Exactly.
All right, keep going. Segue. But we'll get back to here, the most important commandment in verses 28 to 34.
This is where we find a religious leader that's actually maybe not quite as antagonistic. It's almost like Mark's put it in your show. They weren't, most of them were bullfeds, but they weren't all bullfeds. There was one in there that had a bit of common sense about him.
Well, this guy was a seeker. Like he's on the right track.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he asks, what's the most important? Well, he says, this says here, he sees how sharp Jesus was in his answers.
Yep.
Which is the most important of all the commandments? And the commandments meaning, what, the 10 Commandments?
Or possibly,
Implying,
I'd say possibly
or
all of the
laws.
law.
All right.
Yeah, I would say all 613 of them.
Okay. And then Jesus says, the first in importance is, listen, Israel, the Lord your God is one, so love the Lord God with all your passion and prayer and intelligence and energy. I like that.
You like that? The
Yeah,
version?
that version, because otherwise it says, love the Lord your God with all your heart and soul and mind. But I have
strength, yeah.
and strength. I don't know. I don't really have a concept of how do I love with all my heart? How do I love with all of my mind?
Read that one again.
This one says, love with all your passion and prayer and intelligence and energy.
It's nice. Yeah, it's good.
I can make sense of all of those.
It does, doesn't it? It's something that's easier to grasp.
Easy to grasp, understandable, and it sounds achievable.
Yes.
Because I love with all my heart. I don't know.
Yeah, what does that really mean?
Yeah.
Yes, that's right. We say, oh, I love you with all my heart, but what does that really?
Yeah, and like
it's almost like we just toss that away without really thinking about what it means.
Exactly. And love with all your strength. It's like, okay, so when I do push-ups, is it like 101 push-ups for baby Jesus, 102 for crucified Jesus? I don't know.
Good question, Jenny.
Good question.
This is the Shema that Jesus is quoting here, Shema,
Yes.
which is every Jew said this multiple times per day. This was like their religious rhetoric. Hear, O Israel, the Lord your God, the Lord is one. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and all your mind and all your strength.
Yes, and here's the second. Love others as well as you love yourself. There's no other commandment that ranks with these.
That's also in the law, but it wasn't part of the Shema.
It wasn't.
No, Jesus put the two side by side.
Right, okay.
They were
I didn't
big
know
on
that.
love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, and all your mind, and all your strength. That's what they would say. Hear, O Israel, the Lord your God, the Lord is one. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, all your mind, all your strength. They would have, when Jesus says that's the most important commandment, they would have settled on them. They would have gone, oh yeah, that's what we say every day. But then Jesus sort of lets it hang there and goes, oh, by the way, guys, there's another one. And it's actually just as important. And they go, which one's that, Jesus? And he says, love your neighbor as yourself. And that's written in Leviticus. It's written in Leviticus, I think. Leviticus 19:18, my Bible says. So he's plucked that one and put it aside, the one they're all familiar with, and said, it's great that you love God, but you can't really love the Lord with all your strength unless you're loving your neighbor. He doesn't say the second one is less important, he says the two go side by side. The second is equally important. Remember, he was asked, what's the greatest? He says, I'm going to tell you two, and they're both equally the greatest.
And if we remember what he just did in the temple before, when he came in and he got rid of all the merchants and bankers and things, that's the example of what not loving.
That's exactly right. They would have said, oh, yeah, we're worshipping God. They're doing through all the motions of all of this upward stuff while they're not loving their neighbor.
Yes.
And that's what Jesus is coming after.
And this religious scholar says, what a wonderful answer, teacher. So lucid and accurate that God is one and there is no other, and loving him with all of that stuff. Then he says, why that's better than offerings and sacrifices put together. And then Jesus, realizing how insightful this guy is, he says, you're almost there, right on the border of God's kingdom. After that, no one else dared ask the question.
Can we bring this into the 21st century for a moment? I wonder how often we as Christians think, well, we pay our tithes or we volunteer in church, we do the sacrifices, all good stuff. But how much of that is focused on commandment 1A there rather than part B? And Jesus would say, he would basically say, I think, hey, great that you pay your tithes. He says to the Pharisees, you pay your tithes, but you've neglected justice and the love of God. It's great that you pay your tithes. It's great that you're serving. It's great that you're doing the sacrificial stuff. But, if you're not loving your neighbor, if there isn't a change of heart attached to that, if you're not bringing your offering and allowing the giving of your offering or your tithe or whatever to encourage you to ask yourself, hey, actually, coupled with my giving of my offering or showing up to church to serve or running in my Connect group or whatever, if I'm not coupling that with the question of is my life loving my neighbor, then Jesus would say we have missed the point. That's what the religious leader's recognizing here. The two go hand in hand. You cannot just tick boxes to say you're doing something. Otherwise, we're no different to the Pharisees and the religious leaders.
I appreciate the choice of the words here, passion. Love the Lord with all your heart, because I would say that loving the Lord with all my heart would be paying my tithes, serving in church, and doing all those things you're meant to do. But when you say to me, love him with all your passion, I can see immediately that I have no passion in giving my tithes.
Right.
Or
yes.
even sometimes serving in church, but don't tell anybody that.
Oh, I'm a pastor. I feel that sometimes.
Yeah.
You're right. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not that it's bad, But Jesus' passion component
Yes.
brings this whole thing of where's the emotional attachment here?
Yeah.
Where's the connection? Where is it coming from a place of gratitude and amazement rather than duty? All that kind of stuff.
Yeah. And if I have passion for God, passion for service, I'm also going to have passion for my neighbor.
That's it. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's what Jesus was rebuking them for. It's what the prophets were rebuking them for. That's what we need to be reminded of, because we can look religious. We can look like we're flourishing green fig trees, but inside we've got a rot.
Yes. And then I'm also passionate about the rights of people. You become passionate about people who are underprivileged
Yes.
or they're in a bad way.
Yep. That's it. Yeah, come on. You
So
got
that
it.
was a good way he said that. So I'm giving credit to Eugene
Eugene
for
Peterson gets a winner on that
translation
one.
of John Mark.
Yes.
Mark,
Well
the
done.
book Mark.
Well done.
Yeah, okay. So here Jesus keeps going on. He's teaching in the temple. So he's a teacher,
Yep.
in this.
Yep.
And Jesus said, he asked the question. Whenever Jesus just asks the question, you need to pay attention, because it's usually a question that you're not going to know the answer to, and you're going to think, why would he ask that question in the first place?
That's right.
So
And he's
how-
doing this one with a bit of tongue in cheek.
Yeah. So how is it that the religious scholars say that Messiah is David's son, when we all know that David, inspired by the Holy Spirit, said, God said to my master, sit here at my right hand until I put your enemies under your feet, which is in Psalms, right?
Psalm 110.
110.
One of the famous
Yeah.
messianic psalms. They all knew that was a Messiah psalm.
And David here designates the Messiah, my master. This is still a question from Jesus. So how can the Messiah also be his son?
Yeah, how can the Son be talking about someone who pre-exists him, who's the Messiah? How can he be the Son?
Here's this time thing again as
Yeah,
well.
that's
Like,
exactly right.
What is going on?
Yep.
Tell me, what is going on?
Well, this is where I sit with this one. I'm open to further direction or correction on this. It's very clear that the Messiah is the son of David. I mean, he doesn't claim that title for himself. He calls himself the Son of Man, but he is the son of David. Both genealogies, Matthew's gospel and Luke's gospel, go to great extent to.
And we've had the man in this before.
Yes, that's right. We've had the man. Who is this man?
Calling him the son of David.
That's right.
Yep.
Yeah, the man's called him the Son of David. That was a common title for Messiah, no question about it. They knew that the Messiah would come through the line of David. I wonder if so Jesus isn't saying that's not the case. He's just trying to appeal to them about who this Messiah is. You just think that the Messiah is going to be someone who descends from David. And Jesus is trying to appeal a bit more and go, could it be that the Messiah actually predates David? Could it be that even though he's also the son of David, he also predates David? He comes from before his time. He pre-exists, if you like.
He pre-exists. So what do you think this did to the people there listening? They were delighted, actually, with what they heard.
Yeah, I think that's what makes me think they were kind of we're kind of privy to one side of the conversation here because we don't historically know, but there's something that the religious leaders were saying or doing about the son of David and the Messiah. Maybe they were going around going, we all know where the Messiah is coming from. He's the son of David. We don't even know who this guy is. Maybe that's what's going on. We're not seeing that side of the conversation. So Jesus is just sort of in a bit of jest and bantering. Think of Jonathan Roumie's version of Jesus, just quite jokingly and lightheartedly. It just goes, let me tell you a story. This son of David, how come this Messiah said, how come David says the Lord said to my Lord? And it's just the crowd get a bit of a joke out of it because he's kind of bantering with these crowd about and showing the duplicity of the religious leaders.
But he's also showing that the Messiah will be of higher standing than David.
Yes, he is. Yeah. He's elevating Messiah above David.
And in this culture, the sons were always beneath the fathers.
Yes.
But here the son, by the way that David references him as my master,
he's placing him above himself.
Above David.
Yes, that's right.
So with a bigger and greater purpose than David.
Yeah. Because they were thinking David will come. There'll be one who will come who will ultimately be Israel's king, who will do even what David himself failed to do. Because he didn't make it. He blew it with Bathsheba, et cetera, et cetera. He didn't make it. This Messiah's going to come along and he's going to be even a greater fulfillment. That's what they were kind of expecting. Jesus is elevating the bar even further.
He's elevating. He's messing with their minds.
Yeah.
And then he continues teaching them, watch out for the religion scholars. They love to walk around in gowns, preening in the radiance of public flattery, basking in prominent positions. And all the while, they are exploiting the weak and helpless. So we've just heard him say, love others as you love
your
yourself.
neighbour as yourself.
And here he is saying, actually, look at what your religious leaders are doing here. They're exploiting the weak and helpless. The longer their prayers, the worse they get. Jesus did also just say, pray no matter how short or long.
Yeah, that's right. You just said that.
Yeah, no, the worse they get, but they'll pay for it in the end. I mean, what a shocking thing to say.
Yeah.
He's in the hornet's nest. He's really
He's right there. He's in the temple grounds or something, and he's
Yeah.
basically picking a fight with them again.
in a very obvious way.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, well, this is as obvious as you get. That
Yeah.
lot up there, beware of them.
Yeah.
You know, it's pretty intense, right in your face.
And then this next moment here, he turns around and he sees all these rich people putting in money. And then he sees a poor money into the offering. And then one poor widow comes in and she puts in 2 small coins. And then he's just chastised the rich religious elite. And then he turns around to this poor woman and he gives her such a compliment and compassion. And he says, the truth is this widow gave more to the collection than all the others. All the others gave what they'll never miss. She gave extravagantly what she couldn't afford. She gave her all.
Story tells itself, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does.
Jesus is not looking for equal amount. He's not looking for a song and dance. He's not looking for you to make yourself look like you're pious through prayers or generosity or giving or any kind of pride. In fact, he's reprimanding all of that. And he's saying, this woman, she didn't have much, but she gave everything. She was loving the Lord God with all her passion and all the other things that Eugene Peterson said, her energy. That's what it looks like, to love the Lord your God that way.
And let's just contrast the people here, the religious scholars. They're in prominent positions. They have all this glory. They have people treating them kindly. They don't need any help.
No.
They don't need any money. They don't need help. And then here's this woman who comes in and she is helpless before God.
Yeah.
She is saying, I need you to do everything.
Yep, that's right.
I'm
giving the last of what I have. It's totally reliant upon God.
the opposite of the other guys.
Yep, that's right. Complete contrast. And if you remember, he's talked about loving the Lord your God with all your heart and loving your neighbour as yourself. That story is here for a reason. Because this is what it looks like he's calling them out. They should have been loving this poor woman. The fact that she's even in a spot where she needs to put her last 2 copper coins in the offering, shouldn't, according to, if the religious people had been doing their role properly, the leaders, this woman wouldn't be poor.
No, she would be looked after.
She'd be looked after.
And they wouldn't treat her badly. They wouldn't
look down on her and dismiss her and use her.
Wow, look at the rot going on inside this temple. It's diseased.
It's a diseased temple. Yep.
Oh, dear. There's so much going on. It's clever.
It's brilliant.
It's written in a very clever way of contrasting. Did I say that right?
Contrasting. Yep.
All right, let's go on to chapter 13 because we could be there all day.
All right, chapter 13.
In chapter 13, we have Jesus walking away from the temple and one of his disciples gets
the
him
Olivet
to stop.
Discourse.
The what?
Don't worry, I'll tell you in a minute.
I didn't actually hear what you said.
Olivet Discourse is the famous term.
Okay. Teacher, look at the stonework. He points out how amazing the temple is. And then Jesus says, you're impressed by this, but you know what? There's not a stone in that whole works that's not going to end up in a heap of rubble. I mean, what a shock.
It's pretty confronting.
Yeah.
I mean, they're expecting the Messiah to come and rule from this place, and he's going to say the whole thing's actually going to come crashing down, the temple. And if you if you want to get some sense of this picture, folks, you will recognize the picture. But if you just Google view of the Temple Mount from the Mount of Olives, you'll get a sense for what they saw. Now, of course, the temple is not there anymore because Jesus' words were fulfilled, but sitting on there is the Dome of the Rock up on the top of the Temple Mount, the big gold famous dome. But if you look at that picture, you'll get a sense they're sitting across the valley, looking down over the valley and up the hill to all these ancient stones. And where that Dome of the Rock is where this beautiful temple would have been that Herod had built. It's all brand new, this whole precinct. And it was it was the cream of the crop. It was the most most significant of all of Herod's great palaces and great building projects all across that he'd done, all across the region, all across Israel. And no wonder they were overwhelmed by this. And Jesus, they're expecting that, it's going to be so cool when we're ruling from there, when the Romans are gone. And Jesus is going to say, actually, the whole thing's coming crashing down. Why? Because there's a rot.
Yes.
There's a rot in it.
A rot, a disease. Looks amazing from the outside.
Yeah.
But inside.
Full of dead men's bones, Jesus says, and everything unclean, like whitewashed tombs. Yeah.
It would have been. Sorry.
So this is called the Olivet Discourse because it's a conversation that Jesus has on the Mount of Olives. Olivet Discourse. That's where it comes from. That's what theologians call it. So he sits with his disciples and he starts to teach them about things that are in the future.
And this prophecy is quick to come true.
Yes, correct.
Yeah.
Well, it depends on
Well, 70, 80, 70.
Yeah, that's right. It's only 30 years away. But hold some of that. Some of this conversation people will think is all related to end times and eschatology and Revelation and all kinds of stuff that is in our next series. But yes, I think predominantly Jesus is talking about the fulfillment in say 35 years after this.
So you look at that, you can take one sentence and turn it into something very cryptic.
Yes, that's right. But don't think Jesus was trying to be cryptic here.
Right. Okay. Later on, as he was sitting there, here we have your Mount Discourse. What do you say?
Olivet Discourse.
Yes. And Peter, James, and John, they go off by himself. They got him off. What? That's a strange sentence. Tell us when this is going to happen. They want to know what sign will we get things that are coming to a head. Now I know why you're talking about.
Yep.
Now it starts talking about doomsday deceivers.
Doomsday deceivers, yes, that's right.
Doomsday deceivers. And talks about many leaders are going to show up with forged identities claiming I'm the one, claiming to be the Messiah. They'll deceive a lot of people. And this is this famous verse. When you hear of wars and rumoured wars, keep your head and don't panic. This is routine history and no sign of the end. Nation will fight and ruler will fight. Over and over, earthquakes will occur. There'll be famines. These things are nothing compared to what's coming.
To just mark that, folks, because how many times have wars, rumours of... I've been a pastor for a long time, and I can't... If I had $1 for every time someone come up to me and mentioned some war or some earthquake or some famine and said, these are the signs of the times, the sign of the end times, it must be close, I'd be a very rich man. And Jesus has just said, these things aren't the signs of the end times.
Yes, that's true. Yes, yeah. You're right.
Exactly said the opposite. He said these things
routine
are
history.
routine history.
This is just human nature, isn't it?
This is human nature.
We have since the dawn of time or the dawn of humanity or whichever way you view those things, how people have been warring with each other.
And these things have been happening. And the reason that we want to be able to pin them to something in the future, this is the sign that the end's coming, is because it gives us a degree of control. If we feel like we can explain why bad things are happening, then we feel like we've got our control back. When there's wars that are out of our control, there's earthquakes or famines or bushfires or floods or things that are out of our control, if we can go, they're sign of the judgment of God, or we can attribute meaning to and reason to those things, then it makes us feel like we have a degree of control over our life. And that's the problem. Jesus is going, no. You're not supposed to have control over your life. It's a trust journey. It's embracing the God life, whatever it was that Eugene Peterson said a few chapters ago there. Embracing God life is trusting in him, having faith in him.
And there's also, I think, this idea that if you're the end times person, you're kind of important.
Yeah, it gives you some sense of inner knowledge.
Yeah, inner knowledge, all sorts of things.
Yep.
Yeah, I haven't really thought that before. I don't want to go too deep into this because
we
we
won't
could
have
spend
time.
a lot of time discussing it. So let's just gloss over today.
Gloss over the destruction of the temple.
All right, okay. But watch out, Jesus says, and he now goes on to prophesy, I suppose, that Christians are going to be persecuted. At least the disciples are going to be persecuted, And it goes from, they're going to drag you into court. It's going to go from bad to worse, dog eat dog, everyone at your throat because you carry my name. You're here as sentinels to truth. The message has to be preached all across the world. What do you think sentinels to truth means?
A sentinel is a light, as a sign, isn't it? Is that what a sentinel means?
I don't know.
I was just thinking of a sentinel in the sentinels are those.
Aren't they characters in something?
Sentinels. In the Matrix.
Yes.
That's what the sentinels are in the Matrix. Computer figures. But I think a sentinel is like a key figure that's pointing in a certain direction.
Holding the light.
Holding the light.
Do you mean?
Yeah, like we are pointing you in this direction. They are. I think that's how it means that you will become like everyone will focus on you.
And what are we pointing to, or from, or for? Like, if we believe in Christ, what is the role here to be a sentinel? How do you be a sentinel? If the commandment is to love God with all
I'm
your
going to say.
passion,
I was going to go back to the previous chapter.
Love your neighbor.
I wonder if that's what it means to be a sentinel.
Is there anything else that we have to do? Loving our neighbor makes us distinguished from everyone else.
Yes, except that it says in verse 10, for the good news must first be preached to all nations. So there is an element of sentinel,
but that's not everyone. I mean, that's just you, the preacher, right?
No, that's all of us.
What do you mean?
All of us are to proclaim. Well, in this case, he's talking to his disciples. He's going, you guys need to be proclaimers of this good news. Remember, he sent them out to tell the good news, the kingdom of God.
Yes, but that was the disciples.
Sorry,
that's
Jeanie,
all
you don't
you
get a pass
people
on that one.
that are, chosen as preachers. And are you actually literally saying that everybody who believes in Christ should somehow spread the gospel?
Yes, absolutely.
No.
The rest of us, we can just sit comfy and sit pretty, except the preachers, eh?
That's right.
Except Jesus, except on the day of Pentecost. Jesus, and Matthew 18, Jesus will say, I send you all out, take the good news to all people.
So there's something more than just coming to church and serving in the church, which you're not really preaching. You're preaching to the converted there.
Largely, yes.
Largely.
Yep.
So I'm not saying I shouldn't say preaching. I should say the people who come and sit and serve, because that's what we're doing. We're serving. Are you sure we have to do more than that?
Yeah. Well, let's take your hero, your church from America, Rick Warren, The Purpose-Driven Life.
Yes, I do love you, Pastor Rick.
Oh, you do love Pastor Rick, don't you?
He gave me one of the best hugs I've ever gotten in my life.
Oh, is that right? A big bear hug from
yeah.
Pastor Rick. Yeah, there you go.
Yes.
So he talks about the 5 purposes, and he says what you just described there is, he would say it's ministry, serving the body of Christ. Absolutely vital and necessary. But preaching the good news, loving your neighbor, representing Christ well, and that can be a mixture of speaking, talking about Jesus, call it however you want, and also living. He calls that mission. And he says you can't do just ministry and think you ticked your box. You have to be doing ministry and mission and your other purposes as well. But 2 of the 5 are ministry and mission. And I think Jesus is saying here is he's telling them that you guys need to be on mission.
Oh, this is tricky. I liked it. He had me at love God with all your passion and love others, which is hard, but I'm a work in progress.
Yep.
It's not your fault. It's not you. It's me.
Not you. It's me.
But this section here, the message has to be preached all across the world, is kind of something I wasn't expecting.
Okay.
Because I don't want to be brought out, betrayed, and
thrown in jail.
What else it says?
Thrown in court.
And then I always laugh about this next line. Don't worry about what you'll say, because when the time comes, say what's on your heart. This is verse 11. The Holy Spirit will make his witness in and through you. I just find this so, I just have to stop and pause, because you're telling me I need to go and be part of this teaching of the gospel, right?
Yes.
And then don't worry about what I'm going to say. The Holy Spirit's going to speak through me? Like, what? Let's just go back to the love with all your passion stuff.
Maybe the loving God with all your passion stuff is actually what enables the Holy Spirit to speak through you, Jeanie.
Does that really happen to everybody? Are you telling me that everybody who gets on board with this, the Holy Spirit will speak through?
Yeah, I think that's part of our mandate. The human mandate is to partner with God to bring heaven to earth. And Jesus is inviting us into this and saying, if you'll do this, you can be part of the greatest story ever told. You can fulfill what the man and woman in the garden were supposed to do. You can fulfill what every human being is supposed to do. Partner with heaven to bring heaven to earth.
I have to rethink this stuff.
Okay. Rethink away.
No, right.
In your own time.
I'm going to stop personalizing this, because it did make me stop and go, wow, like that's...
It's good that you personalised this, because we don't miss it about, that's about the disciples or about other people. It's personal for us.
Oh, man. Has Mark just totally suckered me in now?
Yeah, he's got you in.
He's now flipped it. So I've been reading this story and suddenly I'm seeing myself in the story.
Yeah.
How did he do that?
Clever writing.
I feel like calling him a bit of a jerk. Suddenly I'm feeling guilty.
You can tell him that when you see him. Thanks for that. I was doing great until we got to verse 12 of chapter 12 or chapter 13.
How did
Thanks,
he
mate.
do this? How did he suck it? How did he do this to me? And then it's like it's going to be brother killing brother.
Yeah.
And I'm in this story now. And well, hang on. What do you mean? I'm going to be brother killing brother, father killing child, children killing parents. Like,
and so on. Yeah.
there's no telling who will hate you because of me. Mark, like, what is going on?
Remember that they wanted it easy. They were hoping that Jesus would kick the Romans out and then it'd be easy from then on. Jesus is promising them, hey, you think this is going to be easy? It's not going to be what you expected, and it's not going to be easy.
And just when I'm ready to bail on the story, the whole thing, and I'm sure they were at that point too, Jesus then says, stay with it. That's what's required. Stay with it to the end and you won't be sorry. You will be saved.
That's great. It's called having an apocalypse of the eschaton.
Apocalypse. All right. So
Stay tuned for Revelation
stay with
series.
it.
Apocalypse of the eschaton.
But it gets worse.
It does.
I'm going to stay with it and keep reading, but be ready to run for it when you see the monster of desecration set up where it should never be. Now, I know that Mark he has spoken many times of spiritual, supernatural demons and all this otherworldly stuff, but when he talks about a monster of desecration, what is that?
The abomination that causes desolation, I think it says, or something like that. They knew what it was. Well, maybe with some thought. He's referencing the book of Daniel. Daniel 10, 9.
Well, what is it? I don't know what it is.
So there's this. It's a prophetic declaration in the book of Daniel about one who would come, who would desecrate the temple.
But didn't Jesus just say the temple was going to be destroyed? So is he desecrating the temple?
No, one's going to come who is going to desecrate it.
Oh, because destroyed and desecrate are two different things.
Destroyed and desecrated. Well, I think that in the narrative in 70 AD, they both happen at the same time. But
I can knock
God
something down, but then
yes,
to desecrate implies that I have
done some kind of horrible act on that thing. Yes, it's okay. So here's where I sit with this. Historically, there was a guy called Antiochus Epiphanes.
I'm going to name my kid that.
Don't, because the dude was bad news. So
maybe a puppy.
Antiochus Epiphanes was one of the Seleucids or the Ptolemies that were the breakup of the Greek Empire after Alexander the Great. And at the time, he's the dude he actually came into Jerusalem and he sacrificed a pig on the altar. It's about 180 AD. So 180 BC, he sacrificed a pig on the altar, which was absolute desecration. Jews don't do that with pigs. Other animals, other religions.
Jews don't eat pigs.
They
don't touch pigs.
Don't touch pigs. We've had the whole pig story on the side of the hill, right? He sacrificed a pig on the altar, the ultimate desecration. That actually led to that Maccabean revolt that I was talking about. It was that very act that this bunch of Jewish zealots went, we're not having this crap. So they rose up and kicked him out and kicked out his forces, and they entered into this time of peace. So that is what, at this moment, that's what they refer to. When they look back, they say, Daniel's prophecy was about that act. That guy came in and desecrated the temple. But Jesus is now saying there's a desecration yet to come, and it's also going to come with a destruction of the temple. He's linking Daniel's prophecy with an event yet to come and saying you'll see desecration, and when you see desecration, it's probably not a good idea to hang around.
Right.
Because there's going to come a destruction of the temple at the same time.
So I can see now why you were saying, when I said to you before this was a quick prophecy, the temple was destroyed in 70.
Mm-hmm.
I can see what you're saying, that other people are saying, whoa, no, this is a lot later.
Yes, that's right. They're seeing this multiple purposes of meanings.
Tense.
Yes.
Even though the temple is destroyed, there's still going to be desecration.
The futurists actually believe the temple will be rebuilt, and that will be the temple that's desecrated.
Oh my gosh, this story! This is just getting bigger and bigger.
It's called dispensationalist, but that's not what Jesus. I don't think that's what Jesus is referring to.
So if I just read the Gospel of Mark, would I get any of this stuff?
If I didn't explain to you what happened 30 years later, when Emperor Titus came in and Roman General Titus came in before he became the emperor. He came in and basically the last hold-up of the Jews in 70 AD in Jerusalem was at the temple, and he sent his forces against them and destroyed the temple. And to make sure it wouldn't be used as a place of worship again, he said, enough's enough. You Jews are too much trouble for us. And he commanded that every stone be pushed over. And you can still go there today and see stones on the floor down the bottom of the Temple Mount. He basically completely destroyed the thing. And it's been those ruins have been lying there for 2,000 years on the ground. If you didn't know that, it might not make sense. But if I told you that and say, this is what Jesus is telling them, they think this temple's beautiful. They think it looks perfect. What a great temple it is. And Jesus is saying, can't you see the rot on the inside? Can't you see that you don't even have to be, Jesus didn't have to be some kind of supernatural prophet to predict what was coming. He knew that the ultimate downfall, the ultimate result of this level of desecration, this level of decrepitness and disease in the people was going to bring it to an end. It was only a matter of time before the Romans came and crushed the place. And that's what Jesus is talking about here.
And this book, Gospel of Mark, was written actually after the temple was destroyed?
Depends on which scholar you talk about. So some scholars will say yes. Obviously, it was written later because he's predicting something very accurately here. So it must have been written afterwards, and then they're putting the words back in Jesus' mouth. So, but other scholars,
putting words in
Jesus' mouth, exactly.
Just be careful with what you.
Yeah, I know that's what they will.
They
will accuse people.
Yeah.
Some scholars will go, yeah, they wouldn't have known. Jesus wouldn't have known. So this is being put back in the story later. But I think from memory that the scholars think that Mark would have been written earlier, before 70, but I can't recall. There's probably no hard and fast rule on it.
All right, I can't recall either because I've been reading this other book that's changing everything I know. It happens to me quite a lot.
Me too, Jeanie. Me too.
Yeah. Okay. So where are we up to here? Oh, this is getting worse. Running for the hills, everybody. Pray this won't happen in the middle of winter and pregnant people, you're going to have it especially hard.
Yeah.
I remember reading that as a kid going, oh, women get it so bad.
Yeah, imagine a pregnant woman cold trying to nurse one baby, pregnant with another.
And if you're living in Judea at the time, so this is specific to the monster of desecration, Judea, specific there.
Yep.
So this is getting even freakier.
Yep.
This is touching on all the Revelation stuff.
This is where this ties in with this seemingly futuristic view.
I mean, Mark is taking me on a journey, a real journey, but he is also asking me to think future tense.
Yep.
And in this spiritual, supernatural, like trust sense.
And don't be worried if this is confusing. He's
Do I look worried?
Not you. I'm talking about listeners, because it is confusing because he's bordering on moving into realms of apocalyptic genre where there's a conflating of metaphors and things start to get mixed together, and it can be hard to go which one he's talking about. But just recognise that was a normal form of a rhetorical tool that was used at the time. That particular genre doesn't mean that it all has to be interpreted easily. It's not supposed to be. It's supposed to be rich in symbolism and meaning and so on.
It's also the longest speech that Jesus makes in this book.
Oh, yeah.
So you have to pay attention. Like, why is he saying this?
Why is this the thing
Why
he's
is
saying?
this the thing? And he keeps going, there'll be nothing like it again. If God let the days of trouble run their course, nobody would make it. But because of God's chosen people, those he personally chose, he has already intervened. Now, is that Israel or is that people who believe? What is that?
Okay, so I know what I would have said when I used to believe in left behind dispensationalism. Let me see what I would say now. In fact, unless the Lord shortens that time of calamity, not a single person will survive, but for the sake of the chosen ones. Okay, I think he has to be talking about what we've just said, Judea, 70 AD, the overthrow of the empire. And he's saying God is going to not prolong that judgment. It's a judgment that come upon the nation of Israel because of its constant rot, and it has to be toppled, but he's not going to drag that on because there's still an elect. Even amongst that rotting fig tree, there's still a few potential figs that he wants to hold on to.
Oh, you said that's so nice.
That's what's going on.
Okay, the next part here, Jesus says, but no one knows the day or hour of any of this. Even Jesus doesn't know the day of hour. So he's no longer talking about the temple, is he? Or is he talking about the second coming? Or what?
Yes.
Yes.
This is exactly what I'm talking about. Suddenly, because you read this and you think, hang on a second, a minute ago he was talking about 70 AD now. Is he talking about the end times or is he still talking about 70 AD? And
he's crossing time.
He's crossing time. I think it's both and. Yes.
Both and.
Yeah.
All right.
Because that's how the Eastern mindset thought. They thought cyclically. They didn't think linearly like we do with a Greek mindset. They thought cyclically. Cyclically. So
Well, it's right a cycle, not right a sequel.
yes, but I think if I check with my dad, who's a stickler for English language, he'd probably say it's cyclically.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure. Okay, so fake
But he
messiahs.
also says privacy, not privacy.
Oh,
Tells me off if I say privacy.
what does he say? Garage or
I don't know about that one.
garage or whatever it is.
Garage.
Fake messiahs and lying preachers are going to pop up everywhere. They're going to have impressive credentials. And the whole credential thing before, which he didn't even talk about,
we
that was
skipped over
raised.
that, didn't we? Where Jesus
And
was talking about
dazzling
them.
performances, which
yeah.
Jesus does. Well, Jesus does have dazzling performances, but these are meant to be on a grander scale.
Yes.
They're
And
gonna
making a big song and dance about it
Yeah.
rather than telling people, hey, don't tell anyone.
Oh, song and dance. That was a note I had. Yes. Maybe it was from something else. Those people will make a real song and dance, but Jesus obviously does not make a big song and dance.
Exactly.
Yeah, okay. And then he's like, don't let the wool be pulled over your eyes. Watch out. So he says, stay with it. Watch out. Following those hard times, and here it gets even weirder. The sun will fade out. The moon will cloud over. Stars will fall out of the sky. Cosmic powers tremble. And you know what? That's what they teach my kids at school,
Tell me more.
that the sun will die.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Okay.
They teach my kids
Yeah.
come home terrified.
Oh, really? They don't bother to tell you that it's going to be in like 4 billion years from now or anything?
But they see time differently.
Right.
They'll go, well, 4 billion years could be like tomorrow.
Okay, I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
Right.
That is what they're taught at school.
Let me just say that this here, when Jesus is quoting this group of prophecies from the Old Testament prophets, Isaiah and Joel and so on, to give this reference, this is where people go, oh, that's signs of the end times. They start to look for signs in the sky, blue moons and blood moons and all this kind of stuff. That is not what this was. This was not some kind of actual event that was taking place that they're looking for to say this would come to pass. This language of moons and suns and stars falling in the sky and cosmic disturbance, it was just a common rhetoric that was used for the overthrow of kingdoms.
Really?
Yeah. So when Babylon was overthrown, they would use
That's
this
a
language.
relief.
Yeah. So it's just rhetoric that's being used to describe the upheaval of wars and rumors of wars and things happening and kingdoms rising and kingdoms falling and all that kind of stuff. It's just Jesus is just saying that's what it's like. He's talking about Rome basically overthrowing Israel, and then of course Rome was overthrown, and that's.
But then we take that literally.
We try to take it literally, but it's not written literally. It's written as a metaphorical description of the overthrow of kingdoms.
It's a completely different
kingdoms.
mindset or way of thinking things.
So if you want to know, go back and read those scriptures that it quotes. Look up your Bible. I'm going to look at it now. So Isaiah 13:10 and Isaiah 34:4 and Joel 10:2:10, which is the one that Peter quotes on the day of Pentecost. Read those, look at them in their context, and you'll see that this is just a normal rhetoric about the overthrow of kingdoms. Kingdoms rising and kingdoms falling.
Okay, I'm going to just leave with that part.
That's enough.
And then the Son of Man talks about entering the grand style in the next part.
So now we've moved to
the second coming.
The second coming.
Oh,
yeah.
Dooley.
Yep.
His arrival will fill the sky. No one will miss it. Basically contrasting, this is going to be a grand arrival. His first arrival was a humble babe. And here, no one's going to miss this. The angels will be dispatched. They will pull in the chosen from the four winds, from pole to pole. I mean, this is grand.
Yep.
And then the next line.
Oh, hello.
Take a lesson from the fig tree.
Which fig tree would that be?
What? We've gone back to the fig tree.
This is why it's good to read large portions of Scripture, because we've seen this is referencing back 2 chapters ago.
And here's the payoff, isn't it? Because here Jesus says, remember we asked, did Jesus know what the seasons were or whatever? And it turns out he does, because he says from the moment you notice its buds, and forming the merest hint of green, summer's just around the corner. So it is with you. When you see all these things, he's at the door. Don't take this lightly. I'm not saying this for some future generations, but these things will happen. Why did he say this fig tree again?
Why did he say this fig tree?
Yeah. Like the fig tree. Take a lesson from the fig tree.
Well, isn't he talking about the fact that the fig tree Israel, the temple, all that system is rotting and about to die? Like you said, so I think he's referring back to it and he's saying, you want to know because right now it looks good. Yeah, I threw over a few money tables, but that didn't really upset anything. It's probably just going to go right back tomorrow to the way it was. But this thing is rotting from the inside and it's going to come crashing down. It's going to wither and die and be destroyed. And so I think he's referencing back to that fig tree to say, this is what I'm telling you is going to happen. There's going to come a day when it looks pretty on the outside and then suddenly it's just all dead and gone. Just as quickly as that fig tree died in a day, this is all going to die in a day. And it did some 30-something years later.
Yeah, and he's also simply saying, and look what I said about the fig tree, or what I said, I cursed the fig tree and it died.
Yep, and I'm doing the same here.
Doing the same thing, yes.
Yep.
And so they're always, every single time they walk past the fig tree, what are they going to be thinking?
That's it. Yep.
Going to be, all of this stuff. They're going to be remembering these last two chapters full, and then also to be keeping watch, to be keeping active in their faith and doing.
That's great. I like that, Jeannie. Well done.
Look at what Jesus did just there.
Just a withering a fig tree, which seems so simple, so insignificant, is actually deeply significant for them.
Yes. And then, continuing on, verses 32. But the exact day no one knows, not even the angels, not even the Father, not even the Son, and only the Father. And I noted the word Father here because he has only called God the Father a couple of times. Did you know that?
No, not in Mark's Gospel, you mean?
In Mark, yeah. Yes. And I don't know where I actually wrote the note, but I was intrigued by that.
It wasn't a common use that he had.
No.
Within Mark's Gospel.
And the next time he uses the word Father, he's actually going to call him Daddy.
Okay, yep.
Yeah. So he's setting up as the Son. He's basically saying, I am the Son.
Yep.
And then he tells us here to stay at your post and keep watch.
Mm-hmm.
Keep watch.
Stay alert. Keep watch.
Stay what? Yes.
Stay faithful.
He's told us three things in this whole thing. I'm just summing up. Not really. There's no point to keep going.
Okay.
Kind of obvious there. But 3 things. What were they?
Stay alert. Stay faithful, was it? Stay the course or something was the word used?
Stay with it.
Stay with it, yes.
Stay with it. Keep watch.
Yep.
And what was the other one?
Wasn't it keep preaching, keep serving? Is that what you're talking about?
Oh, don't worry.
Don't worry, okay.
Don't
yes,
worry.
don't worry, okay.
Yes.
Yeah, that's good.
Don't worry. Stay with it and keep watch.
So why does he have to say, don't worry, stay with it and keep watch?
I don't know.
Well,
I just noted it.
okay, but let's just unpack. Why would Jesus need to say stay with
that's
it?
so funny. I just wrote, ask Rowan this.
So I asked it for you. So let's have a think about it. He says stay with it because it obviously means there's going to be temptations that are going to come. There's going to be circumstances that will come that make us feel like we don't want to stay with it. Keep watch is because it's going to come at any moment. You know, things are going to turn on a dime. And what was the one?
Don't worry.
Don't worry. Why would he say don't worry? Except that there's going to be plenty of things come our way that might cause anxiety. And so the fact that he's giving us advance notice that is the picture of life. We will have all of those things in life. And this is the apocalypse of the eschaton. What keeps us going is a goal and a future and an unveiling of that glorious future where the kingdom wins, where the kingdom does defeat evil. That's what will keep us going through the constant assault of the evil things coming against us in life.
As we stay connected to the God life.
Yes, as we stay connected to the God life. See what you did there? Very good. Yeah.
All right.
It all ties together.
Let's move to 14.
14. We're not going to read the whole thing.
No. In this chapter 14 happens to be, I don't know what I was saying there. This
you were so
happens,
excited.
Yes.
As soon as the music quietened down, you went, in this chapter 14.
I just lost my whole train of thought. But it's a very long chapter.
Yeah, okay.
So there's 70 verses. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to sum up. I'm going to go through what the message says here from 1 to 11.
Okay.
And he calls that anointing his head. and then 12 to 21 traded to the Son of Man. So I'm going to actually use his headings to go through.
Okay.
So here we have anointing his head. This is the scene where he is in someone's house and a woman comes in and pours the bottle of very expensive perfume over his head.
Mm-hmm.
And it starts off, I'm going to read it. In only 2 days, the 8-day festival of Passover and the Feast of Unleavened Bread would begin. And they're all looking for a way to kill Jesus. And they agreed that it should not be done during Passover week because they don't want the crowds up in arms.
Mm-hmm.
That's actually an interesting point. They don't want this done in Passover.
No.
Because the Romans are all there and it just would be chaos and nuts.
Do it behind closed doors when no one's there.
They don't want it. No Passover. And because what else happened at Passover?
What else?
What was Passover?
Passover was the festival where they would sacrifice all the lambs and eat meals to celebrate the Exodus.
To remember when God got them out
God delivered them from Egypt.
And the painting of the blood on the doors. Yep. Okay.
Yeah, and they would replicate all of that in memory of that time. They would eat meat without yeast, and they would eat meat and bitter herbs, all this kind of stuff. It was symbolic.
Okay, so Jesus is having a meal at Simon the leper's house. We don't know who this guy is. We just hear he was the leper, but of course he must have been healed. Because
most likely, yes, that's right.
There's no real story, unless he is the unknown leper before in another.
He could have been.
Could have been. And this woman comes in and she pours this water.
Oh, it says in this version he had previously had leprosy, so he must have been healed.
Okay.
Yep.
She pours this expensive bottle of perfume over, which is actually called spikenard.
Yep.
Yeah, that's an interesting name, spikenard.
Spikenard, or essence of nard.
She pours it on his head, and then other versions say he wipes it on his feet and stuff, all that, right?
Yeah. Scholars are divided about whether or not there's two different anointings or it's the one anointing and all this sort of stuff. But once again, it's one of those things where there's differences between different gospels.
Okay, yeah.
But let's just stick to Mark's gospel.
Yes.
In this case, it's on his head.
And then you have some of the guests here, it says, getting furious, saying that's criminal, a sheer waste. This perfume could have been sold for well over a year's wages and handed out to the poor. And they're swelling up with anger, nearly bursting with indignation over her. But Jesus says, leave her alone. Why are you giving her a hard time? She's done something wonderfully significant for me. You'll have the poor with you every day, but you won't have me forever. So what she's done here, she did what she could. She has pre-anointed my body for burial. Can you imagine hearing that? For my body for burial, everyone would be like, what? And you can be sure that wherever in the whole world the message is preached, what she did is going to be talked about admiringly.
Which is what we're doing right now.
What a prophecy.
Incredible.
Oh, my goodness. Yeah. And then,
absolutely.
And then this says Judas Iscariot. He was one of the 12. He then goes to the high priest and he's determined to betray him.
Stop there, because the other Gospels will tell us that Judas is the one. One of the other Gospels at least tells us that Judas is the one who complained. It's John's Gospel.
You're right about that.
He says Judas says, why this waste? This money could have been sold and given to the poor. And John actually comments and says, oh, by the way, he didn't really care about the poor. He had, the money bags, and he used to spend money on himself. Yeah. It's like John just gets that written in there.
Well, this one's kinder to Judas because
it's
some
a little
of the
kinder
guests,
to Judas, yes.
Yeah. And for whatever reason, Judas is annoyed and he looks for the right moment to hand him over.
Actually, the Judas character on The Chosen, I'm really getting to like him. I think that it's going to be so hard when you realise that he's going to betray him.
Watch that.
Because he's really, he's a troubled figure, but he's really figuring out Jesus. And I think, it's going to be so hard when he betrays him.
So basically, in the first few verses of this, the high priests have decided they want to kidnap and kill him.
Yeah.
And not during Passover. And then Judas comes up and he's like, hey.
How about we do it?
How about we do it now? I'm going to look for the right moment.
The right moment, yep.
Imminently. And they can't believe their ears. So let's just go back to this spikenard stuff. What was that used for?
If I'm right, it was a wedding perfume. So a young
wedding perfume.
Is that correct? A young girl would save this special perfume for her wedding night, and she would use it to anoint her own body on the day of her wedding.
It was a very strong smelling, a beautiful smell.
Yes.
And people could smell it wherever you went.
Very strong.
Yeah.
Hence why the bride would have it on their wedding day, I think.
Yeah, and you know what?
It's worth a lot of money.
It's worth a lot of money, and because it comes from the Himalayas.
Wow, so there was a travel component of the cost. Okay.
Yeah, that's
a long way.
Yeah. When I read that and researched that, I thought, I can't believe I know this is going to sound funny, but there was a world going on outside the Bible.
Ah, right. Okay. Yep.
Because when you read the Bible, you
So
get
focused
so
in on-
focused on this. You think,
Yeah.
I know this Egypt. I know this Ethiopia. But
Beyond that,
beyond that,
maybe Rome a little bit this time, but that's
there's
about
a
it.
world.
Yeah. Well, we don't hear much about that side of things from way over in the Himalayas. That's India,
No.
Pakistan. There was a very big trade by that
Well,
time.
there had to be
They
for
had to be.
this.
Well, by this time, it was even well before this. There was big trades. The Silk Road came away from China.
Yes.
Was already in place. The Silk Trade and so on. From
Yeah.
that part of the world. Yeah. So there you go. So that it came from all the way over there. I didn't know that, but so this isn't something that every Jewish girl has. This
No.
is an expensive.
Judas would have wanted this.
Yeah, it would have been worth a lot of money.
A lot of money. It would have been worth more than 30 silver coins.
Right. Okay. So had she donated it to the cause,
To Judas,
he
who
would
in
have been
the-
set for pocket money for the next little while, right?
In the other, what was it, Gospel of John?
Yes.
Yeah,
in John's
so he
Gospel.
could have pocketed. Look at that. Isn't that sneaky?
He could have pilfered a little bit off, laundering off the top, and no one would have noticed because the amount of money it would have brought into the cause.
Yeah, and money here is really in his heart, isn't
Yeah.
it, Judas?
Yep.
So when you think about that, you think about how expensive it is, then it makes sense why Judas goes off to betray him.
Yep.
Anything else you want to say there?
No, I think it shows what stirred him in his heart. And it's worth adding that, like you just said, this is a few days, 2 days before Passover. This is taking place. Jesus isn't washing this out.
No.
This is being poured on his head. This is not being washed out in 2 days.
This is what
he
he's
is
smelling
carrying
of
this smell
when he goes to the cross.
all the way to the cross. Yeah. And he says it's for my burial, but even on the cross and for all around him, this smell is intense.
It's a strange thing to mix that beautiful smell with the blood that is coming up in the story.
Yeah.
People
Well,
would have...
Paul will say, for some, talking about the message of Christ, it says, for some, we are the aroma of life, and to others, we are the stench of death. He describes the gospel, the good news. He says it brings life to some, and to others, it's just they don't get it. It's just death to them. So I wonder if he's referencing this whole thing of Jesus smelling of this oil.
Interesting. Mark has reminded us of sight, of partial sight, full sight, 20/20 vision. He's reminded us of our physical need for food and hunger, and here brings in scent.
Okay, he's
into
getting
the story.
We're getting a full senses experience.
Yeah, we're being drawn more into the story because
touched
these
the man that was the leper.
Yeah, these people would have known this, and they would have just saying the word, you could smell it. Like
Yes.
if you said, I don't know, Chanel number 5.
Yeah, you know what it smells like.
Yeah, or actually here, Subway.
Yep, you smell Subway as soon as you walk in the door.
Exactly, McDonald's.
Well, my kids always say Red Door perfume, which is my mother's perfume.
Oh,
as long
yes.
as, yeah, so
Yeah.
They say, oh, I remember that growing up with.
Yeah.
Hi, Mum.
So there you go. So he's walking around as he's carrying his
Yep.
cross. He's smelling of a wedding.
Spikenard. We're smelling of a
Spikenard,
wedding. Yep. Isn't that interesting? He's smelling of a
weird.
wedding
Yeah.
at his death.
Yes.
That's got to be prophetic.
Man, that's for later date. So here now we're in the next section from 12 to 21.
The Last Supper
It's
area.
called Traitor to the Son of Man. And on the first days of the Unleavened Bread Festival, that day they prepared the sacrifice. And the disciples want to know, where are we going to eat this meal? And then Jesus, he directed 2 of his disciples, go to the city, you'll find this man carrying a water jug. He'll meet you. A man carrying a water jug is not a man of influence,
No.
is it? It's a man. So he's basically meeting a servant.
He's an ordinary servant. Yep, that's
You
right.
meet this servant and he's going to have this room prepared. So where's his master? Maybe not there. I didn't have thought that before.
Yeah. One of the Gospels tell us it's a prearranged sign.
It's a prearranged place. Yes, it's.
Does it say that in this Gospel or is it one of the others?
Where's the guest room? And it just says he'll show you a spacious second story room,
Yeah.
swept and ready. Prepare for us there.
Yeah, I think one of the Gospels will say it was prearranged. So it maybe isn't as prophetic in that sense of future telling, like, oh, wow, this is a miracle. It might be, but I got the impression that Jesus has been in and out of town all week. He knows this is all happening. He's just queued up someone and said, oh, I'm going to send my disciples. Be ready.
Oh, see, I didn't read it like that at all. I read between the lines here. Here's Judas wanting to find the perfect moment to get him down.
Mm-hmm.
Judas is keenly listening. Ooh, where are we going to have the meal? What's the address?
Okay.
And Jesus knowing Judas, Jesus is like, actually, here's the cryptic answer. You go find this servant guy, and he's going to take us to the house.
And it's not Judas who does this.
Yeah.
So Judas doesn't know.
Judas doesn't know, so he can't.
Nice.
He can't.
I like it. He can't prearrange
yeah.
to have the Roman soldiers show up or the Jewish soldiers show up at the door of this house.
Yes, because it's in Jesus' interest to have this meal.
Yep.
There's purpose of this meal.
There's purpose for the meal.
So
I like
Judas
that, Jeannie.
doesn't know where
Judas doesn't know where they're going, so he can't prearrange anything. Wow, that's good.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, that's good. I've never heard that before. I reckon that's it. I'll pay that one.
I don't know. Okay, then after sunset, see, in the dark.
Yep.
So Jesus is aware that of what is going on after sunset. Who moves in the dark? Not many people. They were at the supper eating after sunset. He came with the 12 to the table. And then Jesus is like, I have something hard but important to say to you. One of you is going to hand me over to the conspirators. One of you who is actually eating with me at this moment. Stunned, they're all asking like, isn't it me? Is it me? Is it me?
Mm-hmm. They didn't know.
No, but I was really struck by the humanity in that moment of people going, hang on.
Am I capable of this?
Am I doing that?
Yes.
Is it me? Is it me? What?
Yeah, that's right. Because none of them can think about any of them doing it. So they're thinking, well, surely it's not me. You know, I can totally understand that.
But they understood the depths of their own darkness,
yes,
I think,
yes.
in that moment. Like, could I possibly
could I be the one
turn
to do this
against my master?
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a great way to put it.
Yeah, and Jesus has been teaching them about humanity, about themselves. And I think this question that they ask of themselves, in this moment, they're able to give themselves more fully to Christ.
I like that.
Because by saying that, they're
doing
like,
some
I'm actually
introspection.
capable of doing things.
Yes.
I hope I don't.
I hope I don't. But wow, could I really do that? Yeah.
And then, yeah.
That's good. I
And
like
then,
that.
yeah, Jesus is like, it is one of the 12. It's one of you here. But it turns out the Son of Man is entering into a way of treachery well marked by the scriptures. So there's no surprises here. In another sense, the man who turns him in turns traitor to the Son of Man. It's better that he was never born.
That's a tough call, isn't it?
Now, other books basically have Peter saying, I'm never going to do this. That's not me. But this one he first of all has the meal, and then Peter says that.
Peter says it after. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So they're having this meal. This is my body. This is the communion meal.
Yep.
Take this. He blesses the bread, as we know. Take this. This is my body.
So he's repurposing the Passover meal to something new.
Oh, wait, what? What do you mean?
Well, this is the Passover meal that he's doing this at, which is the historical meal that the Jews have been doing for 1,400 years. And he is now repurposing that meal, including another cup and centering it no longer around the lamb that was sacrificed in the Passover lamb, but now around himself as the fulfillment of the Passover
So
lamb.
when he says, take, this is my body, is he saying, I am the lamb?
Yeah.
Oh, take the chalice and drinking the wine. This is saying this was meant to represent the lamb of the blood, the blood of the lamb, but now this is my blood.
Yep, that's right.
God's new covenant.
Yeah, new covenant.
Poured out for many people. What does that mean, God's new covenant?
The first covenant, there's several covenants in the Bible, but they are, for want of a better word, contractual arrangements. Let's just use that word, although it's a bit oversimplified. They are agreements between we're talking about biblical covenants between God and various different human beings to fulfill a purpose and say this is going to change our relationship from moving forward. You do this, well, I'll do this, that kind of arrangement. And so Jesus is now instituting this new covenant or New Testament. That's where our word New Testament comes from. Old Testament means Old Covenant. This New Testament, new covenant that's going to come into place because of his death, which will fundamentally alter the contract, the arrangement that God has with humans through his death, through his defeat of sin and defeat of the enemy and so on.
Would they have gotten a concept of this? Any concept?
I don't know. at the time. I think this is one of those things they reflected on later. But fairly early on, because Paul will re-quote this story in 1 Corinthians 10, 11, wherever he quotes the communion message. And he actually says there, he says, "For I pass on to you that which was passed on to me, that on the night Jesus was betrayed, he took the cup and broke it." So very early on, they had ritualized this meal. They had formed it, thought about it, talked about it, reflected on it, and recognized the significance of this meal. So that by the time Paul's writing that to the 1 Corinthians, which is probably only within maximum 30 years from this time, maximum, it's one of the earlier letters, this has already become part of the Christian worship service. There was great significance. But could they have got it right at that moment? I don't know. Maybe in part.
Well, what they are seeing is the remembrance of the rescue, and then Jesus hinting he is the rescuer.
That's right. Yep, that's right. So in the moment, they're not getting there, but afterwards they're certainly reflecting back and going, oh, that's what that was all about. Yeah.
Right. I'll take your word for it. No, I know what you mean.
Yep.
Okay, so they go on here. They end up, Jesus says, "I'm not going to drink wine again until the day I drink it in the kingdom of God." It's a shocking thing to say. Again, he's going to die. Then they sing a hymn, and then they go directly to the Mount of Olives. And it's that Jesus tells them, you're all going to feel your world is falling apart and that it's my fault. There's a scripture that says, "I will strike the shepherd, the sheep will go helter-skelter."
Helter-skelter.
Helter-skelter. "But after that, I'll be raised up. I will go ahead of you, leading the way to Galilee." And he's being literal here. That's what he literally does.
That's what he does.
Yeah.
Yep.
And this is when Peter blurts out, "Even if everyone else is ashamed of you and things fall to pieces, I won't be."
And Jesus goes, "Really, Pete?"
"Don't be so sure, Pete. Today, this very night, in fact, before the rooster crows twice, you will deny me 3 times. And Peter blusters in protest. "Even if I have to die with you, I'll never deny you." And all the others say the same thing. So even they were questioning themselves before. Now Peter's gone, no, I won't do it. Now they've all changed.
Now they've all changed. Yep.
Sadly, they all abandoned.
They actually all, in that sense,
all of them
betrayed him, didn't they?
Yeah,
They
they
all
did.
abandoned him, yes.
And Jesus then goes to Gethsemane. Oh, I should have said this is a different title now. Gethsemane, from 32 to
43, 42.
42.
Yep.
Yeah, so Gethsemane is what? A city or a hill or a place?
It's an olive grove.
An olive grove.
At the foot of the Mount of Olives, just across from the Temple Mount, right against
That's
the bottom
all
of
it
the
is.
valley. It's
An
just
olive grove.
The word Gethsemane means olive press.
So he goes to an olive press.
He goes to an olive grove, yep.
Okay. "Sit here while I pray." So he tells his disciples to sit here, but then he takes 3 away.
Yes. Yep.
So "sit here while I pray." He doesn't tell them to pray, does he? Just noting
No,
that.
that's what it says there. Sit
But
here, I'm going to go and pray.
He
Yep.
takes the closer 3 and he tells them to pray
Yep.
later on, because he plunges into a sinkhole of dreadful agony. And he tells them, "I feel bad enough right now to die, so stay here and keep vigil with me," which means to keep pray.
Yep.
Why would Jesus need prayer? With me, pray with me, because he actually goes a little further ahead.
Isn't this him showing his humanity?
He falls to the ground.
This is deeply human.
He prays for a way to get out.
Also deeply human. Also reflective of the human heart. This is Jesus' humanity rising to the absolute surface. He's about to go through the worst of what humanity can go through, and it's rising up. He can identify with us because of this humanity that he displays here.
And he wants close connection with these friends. He wants their support. He would be feeling lonely, I guess.
Yeah. Understand. Distressed.
Distressed.
Yeah. He says, "My soul is deeply troubled and distressed." This is a significant moment.
I have to confess something.
Tell me.
I find this really confronting.
In what way?
The guy that I've read about, he should be stoic.
Ah, right.
I shouldn't laugh through that, but that's
because he seems to be so self-assured.
He seems to be so self-assured, so much of a leader, so confident, so knowing, so kind and compassionate. I start to think, why can't you just go gracefully?
Right. Okay. Wow.
Because why can't you go gracefully? Instead, you disintegrate to the ground and you are asking me, I'm already in the story, as I said before, and now you're actually evoking an emotional response from me and you're asking me to be deeply engaged with the way you're feeling, Jesus. And I think that's not fair.
Oh, it's not fair.
Yeah.
I was wondering where you were going with this.
Yes.
It's not fair that Jesus would bring us into it. Okay.
Yeah. I wish this part didn't
happen.
exist because it's deeply confronting.
Yeah, well, this is your Good Friday service. We're confronted with the cost of our sin. We're confronted with the cost of our frailty in our humanity. Not frailty as in just that we're frail as in we're, not immortal, but the frailty of our character, that each of us is capable of defining what we just talked about, of actually turning our back on Jesus, of walking away. And this shows me the deep love. This wasn't just water off a duck's back for Jesus. This was deeply costly, and yet his love compelled him to do that. So this particular location is one of the two locations where I would argue are probably the most emotional on any Israel tour for people going there reflecting on Jesus. Is this moment here where the Garden of Gethsemane, you just think this is where Jesus died. He died on Calvary, just up the road, but this is where, from this moment on, he was resolute. This is the point at which he did the darkest, deepest wrestle, the temptation to shortcut the purposes, and that happened in this moment. And Jesus, no wonder he's in anguish and toil, and he's working that through. But that encourages me, because it shows me how much God loves me, that he would do that for me.
Oh, see, I go the opposite. I've been to that place.
Yeah.
And I didn't find it.
You didn't find it that way?
I didn't feel it that way at all, because I recognize that within me, I just put up the blocks and the barriers. Like, I don't want to go to that depth of despair. I found the alleged Beatitudes place deeply moving.
Did you really?
Yes.
It's one of the least moving. The Church on the Hill, the funny
it
little.
didn't cost me anything. I was like, oh, okay, I get this great preaching and the sense, oh, look at the amazing view that we looked
gotcha.
out. But on Gethsemane, to go there and to allow him into my heart just a tiny bit is too confronting.
Yeah.
And that's why this whole section here is like, oh, I can only read this very lightly.
Right, okay.
Because I sit with it and a part of me goes, why didn't you run away? Why are you there? You know you're innocent. Why are you standing there waiting for them to come and get you? Like, you're a really cool guy. Like, I love what you've done in the temple. I love your rearrangement, your new decorating. I love the fig tree.
That's very good.
Love all of that. But
now you're staying there waiting for your arrest.
When you don't have to.
Yeah. For God so loved the world that he gave his one and only son.
And you're using words like, I feel bad enough to die in a sinkhole of dreadful agony. It's like, please turn the page. This is when I close my eyes and like scary movies, or or like, when you're a kid and like there was the love scene on and your parents would always walk in at the
say,
door.
not at that moment.
I'd be like, I'm out of here.
Yeah, that's right.
This is the same thing. It's like, I don't want to go
hard.
here.
It's in the too hard basket.
It's too hard.
Yeah, okay. I think that we should appropriately allow ourselves to be confronted by this, because this is the crux of the problem, our sinfulness. This is the crux of the problem. Would we walk away in this moment?
I feel like I'm starting to sweat.
Yeah, it is. It is confronting, but we need to allow this to confront us in order to take our sin seriously. It cost so much for God to redeem us.
Sorry?
No, I was going to say, this is the cost. This is the level of anguish that Jesus went through. On the cross, he's in pain, but it's nothing
like this,
I don't think. I think this is the narrative tells us this is the deepest level of emotion. It's almost as I remember Ken Chant saying years ago, Jesus was prospering on the cross. He had done his battle in Gethsemane, and not to in any way belittle the pain, but in that moment he is resolute. In that moment he is in control. Even before Pilate, he's got complete control of the situation. Hey, you know what? You wouldn't have any authority over me if I hadn't been given that authority. He's got complete control. This is the point. where he won that control, because this is the point where he was tempted to go a different way, give up on the whole thing.
And I wouldn't have blamed him. I would have said,
No.
yeah, I agree with you.
I totally
Get
get
up
that.
and run.
Yeah, exactly.
Go.
And I think that's why it makes me love Jesus all the more.
Dear, it's too confronting. And correct me if I'm wrong, the last time he was on the Mount of Olives, it was more of a celebratory sort of thing where the Transfiguration took place. Is that the same place? No?
No, the last time he was on the Mount of Olives was, well, this week he's been on the Mount of Olives 2 or 3 times. He's been up and down the Mount of Olives. You have to go to get to Bethany where he was staying. You had to go back and forward past this mountain every day. So he was on the Mount of Olives. We rode the donkey down, rolled the colt down. He sat back up on the hill the day he talked to them in the discourse. And this is just down the bottom of the valley.
Okay. No, what I'm thinking of is the last time he takes his 3 friends away.
Yes.
They have this great
Yes,
moment.
that's true.
The transfiguration.
Different
and they
mountain,
see the glory.
but same.
And Peter's got all
people.
this strength and energy. He wants to build these memorials. And here,
This
poor
time,
old Pete can't even
just
stay awake.
Can't stay awake. They're overcome by grief and loss.
But they're seeing Jesus on the ground crying. I imagine he's crying. He doesn't really say that. But and they just abandon him. They don't do as he asks. They don't pray. They just keep falling asleep 3 times.
Yep.
Jesus comes back, and on the 3rd time, Judas is there.
Mm-hmm. 3 times. Olive, there's significance here. I haven't got time to go into it now, but olives are pressed 3 times.
Oh, my gosh. Yeah,
The first press,
I would
is
love to go down a
extra
rabbit
virgin
hole
olive
on
oil,
that.
and then the next press, and then the 3rd press is the stuff they would use, the junk stuff. It completely crushes. It's got pip and everything else in it as well. But the first press is the really expensive stuff. But then by the time you press the thing the 3rd time, it's pretty much used for the poor, and it's used for lighting and stuff like that. It's got olive stuff in it. And that's the point.
Branch,
Jesus is completely crushed to the point where he's just nothing left of him, basically, at this point. So that's why it's 3 times.
I need to study that. That's really cool.
Yeah.
Do you know cool isn't a word that you say anymore at school, by the way?
No, that's probably right too.
Lame is also another word.
Word you don't say?
Yeah.
It's really lame to say lame, is it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Language keeps changing so quickly. I can't keep up. I'm an old man now, Jeanie.
Okay. See how I'm changing the topic? Because
Yeah,
I'm
you're just
actually,
trying to
I find this so
move on.
confronting.
Right, move on to the next part of the story then.
All right. So he gets up after this moment of awfulness.
We're doing pretty good considering we weren't going to read the whole thing.
My betrayer has arrived.
Okay.
And this part is called a gang of ruffians from 43 to 52. No sooner were the words out of his mouth when Judas, the one of the 12, showed up and with a gang of ruffians and brandishing swords and clubs. And then they'd worked out a signal. I'm going to greet him with a kiss. And to greet a person with a kiss was usually culturally a sign of respect.
Yes.
So he kisses Jesus. On the cheek?
Yes, on the cheek.
That's the one, sees him, makes sure he doesn't want to get away. And someone grabs a sword and cuts an ear off. We don't know who that is in this.
Not in this gospel, we don't. That's
that
convenient,
interesting?
isn't it?
It's
Convenient. Because this is Mark telling Peter's gospel.
This is Peter's eyewitness story. Yeah.
He's still quite happy not to. Well, you mean he's talking about his denial, but he's not prepared to admit that he was the one who chopped the ear off.
Yeah.
John makes sure we know that, though.
Yeah.
Pete and John have a bit of a go at each other.
Well, they have the whole way through. There's this arguing that Peter, James, and
that's
John,
exactly
they all
right.
have. Yeah. Okay. But then Jesus is like, well, why didn't you come with me? Why did you come with swords when you could have just grabbed me in the temple any day? I've been teaching there every day and you never lifted a hand. But what you've actually done by doing it this way is confirming the prophetic writings.
Yep.
What prophetic writings are those?
Numbered with the transgressors, I think it says. Something like that. Was that when he goes on the cross?
Yeah, that's the cross.
That's
but the
cross.
next line here, while you look that up,
Yep.
all the disciples cut and run.
Yeah. So there is there is a prophetic writing. I'm just trying to remember which one it is. What verse is it, roughly? There is it here.
50.
50.
And here, 51 to 52 is really funny. A young man was following along. All he had on was a bed sheet. Some of them, the men grabbed him, but he got away running off naked, leaving them holding the sheet. We don't know who this is, but whoever it was decided it was better to run away naked than go with Jesus.
Do you know who the scholars think it was?
Who?
Mark.
Mark! Not this guy.
This guy, John Mark.
They think it was John Mark.
They think it was John Mark.
Wow. That's
Don't ask me where that comes from, but that's what
and he's writing that.
He has traditionally been the one that they say.
Traditionally.
Yeah.
That's
They would have some
really
reason for why
funny.
they believe that. I think that's an ancient. It's not.
But he was naked at the beginning. All he had on was a bed sheet,
What was he doing with a bed sheet
and
on?
then it was taken off.
What does it say? One young man was following, clothed only in a long linen shirt. So it's just like it's like a nightgown.
Nightgown.
Yeah. This is the middle of the night, maybe something like that. Maybe Mark had just come out to check on things. I don't know. There has been talk about that. It's interesting you talk about that. Back to your question about Jesus saying this is fulfilling the scriptures. There's no reference to which scriptures it's fulfilling. The fact that he was not arrested in the temple. So there must be just this general sense of all of the narrative of the scriptures that's being fulfilled rather than any specific one, unless you've got a narrative in yours.
No, I don't. Other than I had no clue what he was referencing. Which
Scriptures? I'm going to ask ChatGPT this one. Which scriptures are being fulfilled in Mark 14:49? Yeah, so it's just a reference to scriptures in general. Which is what I thought. It's not really handpicking anyone. It's the general testimony of scripture around the suffering servant. Isaiah 53. The passage of the suffering servant, Psalm 41, even my close friend, someone I trusted who shared my bread, that actually is quoted in the Last Supper. Zechariah, strike the shepherd and the sheep will be scattered. That's an interesting one. And Psalm 22, while not directly mentioned, it's often associated with the crucifixion of Jesus. So, yeah, I think it's just more the general testimony as opposed to any one scripture.
All right. Okay. That makes sense because it's, summing up the whole thing.
Yeah.
All right. So the next bit is called Condemned to Death, 53 to... 65.
Mm-hmm.
And they take Jesus to the chief priest. This is nighttime, right?
Yes, this is well into the night time. We finished the Last Supper, so it's probably midnight or something like that.
Midnight. Okay, so the high priest, the religious leaders and scholars had gathered because they knew that Judas was going to bring him in.
Mm-hmm.
Peter follows at a safe distance and they go to the chief priest's courtyard. And do they often have legal sort of trials at nighttime?
It's not a normal thing, is it?
No.
Closed for business in the middle of the night?
No.
Why is this happening in the middle of the night?
Yeah.
Because the crowds aren't around. All those things I'm worried about.
No crowds. So does this make it legal or illegal?
Does it make it legal or illegal? Well, I don't think there'd be any law that would require the trial to be public. I don't know. I don't know if it'd be illegal for the ruling authority to put someone on trial, like legally, as in terms of according to Jewish law or whatever. I don't know. I can't think of any law that would say it. Certainly wouldn't be best practice, that's for sure. I don't know whether or not they would have right to their own counsel in this era. I don't think they would have had right to defend themselves and so on. But I don't know. What do you think?
Well, I'd read somewhere else that it was illegal, but I don't have the reference note here, so I'm not going to talk about it.
It could be. I can't think of any particular law that would. But there could have been Roman laws in place or Jewish laws in place.
Yeah,
this time.
When I say illegal, I mean by Jewish laws.
By Jewish law, yeah. I can't think of anything, but that's quite possible that there was some Jewish law or something that I'm missing in the Mosaic law that wouldn't allow this to take place.
Because we know from the next few verses.
Certainly not ethical. Let's put it that way.
No. We know from the next few verses certainly illegal and unethical things happen where the high priests are conspiring, obviously, it seems to be in front of Jesus.
Yeah, it's intentional, isn't it?
Yeah, with the Jewish council, who are the Jewish council?
This is the Sanhedrin. These are the ruling elites. Yep.
Right, okay. And they're looking high and low for evidence against Jesus and then to sentence him to death, but they find nothing.
They can't do it.
And they do find plenty of people willing to bring in false charges. So they're willing to use that.
I wonder if they've got false charges there. So, is it illegal? This bit's illegal.
It's definitely illegal.
Because this is the very thing Jesus was talking about, not loving their neighbour, abusing their position of power to get their way.
But isn't there like a commandment, do not give false testimony?
I think it might be one of the 10, isn't it?
Is it? I don't know.
Exactly. They are willingly disobeying this law.
Willingly. Okay. So, but these two people, whoever it is, they can't make their stories align.
Yep.
So they're cancelled out. So what happens is there's two witnesses need to come in, right?
Yep. You can't kill someone on the law says do not put someone to death on the testimony of only one witness.
Okay, so those two people come in, they're taken off to separate rooms, they tell their stories and they have to match.
Mm-hmm.
In this case, they did not match.
They didn't match, yep.
Okay, so they couldn't do that. And then a few of them stand up and they lie. And you remember when Jesus said about the temple, what were his exact words?
He said, destroy this temple and I will rebuild it in 3 days.
No, he doesn't say that, did he? When he talked about the temple with the disciples before, no stone will be
Turn on another. That's not the reference here.
Oh, no. Did you talk about this in Mark twice? Or did
I don't
am
know.
I forgetting
I'm trying
that?
to think where he talked about it in Mark. I don't think he has talked about it in Mark. Mark skipped this part of the story.
Right, okay.
But he does in one of the other Gospels. They say, what sign will you give us that you have right to do this? And he says, destroy this temple and I will rebuild it in 3 days. And they say, it's taken 46 years to build this temple and you're going to destroy it in 3 days. And then it's John's Gospel. Then John says, but the temple he was talking about was actually his body.
Right. We
So-
might have talked about this actually.
I don't think it's in Mark's Gospel.
Okay.
I think it's in John's.
I get confused with everything
Yeah.
we talk about.
We-
I
no,
never
this is
remember what
John's
we
Gospel.
talk about.
So I've always thought that's what the reference is, that he said that very publicly in front of them all. You destroy this temple and I'll build it in
Yes,
3
he
days.
did.
So they are saying, therefore, that he is charged with blasphemy and sacrilege to claim to
Well, they
destroy
twist
the
his
temple.
words a
They've
bit,
twisted
don't
his
they?
words. Yes, that's what the
Saying,
point is.
I'm going to tear it down.
Yeah.
And in 3 days, I'm going to build
Yeah,
it.
and that's not what he said. He said, if you destroy
No.
this temple, I'll rebuild it.
Yeah, it's not the right words.
It's not the right
and
words.
then they even know it's not right because they couldn't even agree
They
exactly
still can't agree exactly.
on what
Yep.
it is. And in the middle of this, the chief priest stands up and asks Jesus, what do you have to say?
It's
to
like we
this
can't get a testimony
accusation?
against you, so let's see if we can get you to
Yeah.
incriminate yourself.
What are you going to say? And Jesus was silent,
Mm.
which was also a what was I gonna say?
Passover lamb? Is it
No,
Passover?
a philosophy, no, a prophecy.
Prophecy. As a lamb before, it's
Yes.
Isaiah 53. As a
Okay.
lamb before the shear is silent, so he did not open his mouth. Yep.
Okay, my brain is melting. We've been talking for a long time now. And so, but then Jesus says nothing, and the chief priest is like, well, hang on a second. I'm going to try again, and asks directly, are you the Messiah, the Son of the Blessed?
And he says, yes, I am.
Yes, I am. And you'll see it yourself, he also adds, the Son of Man seated at the right hand of the Mighty One, arriving on the clouds of heaven. Not only does he say, I am the Son, he then says,
I am the Son of Man.
no, I am equal to God, right? At the
Yeah.
right hand
Oh,
of the Mighty
absolutely.
One.
He is quoting Daniel's 7 vision here, the Son of Man vision. They all know that that's a messianic psalm, that there would be a human who would ascend to the right hand of God and would be seated beside him. That's why Jesus called himself the Son of Man all the time. That was a messianic term. They knew that. And they knew that this was a representative of a divine being. And that's why, that's all the priest needs. In his mind, that's blasphemy.
Blasphemy is, I am God, equal with God.
Equal with God.
And
He's made himself
that's-
equal with God,
Okay, so that's why he loses his temper, rips his clothes.
which
and
he's
he
not allowed to
says
do.
He's not allowed to lose his temper.
He's not allowed to rip his clothes. The high priest must not rip his clothes. He has
I
broken
missed
the
that.
law by ripping his clothes.
This is it adds to all the
Drama.
drama and all the illegalness.
Yes, the whole thing is a kangaroo court.
Kangaroo court. Okay. And you heard the blasphemy. He says, are you going to stand for it? And then they condemned him one by one and they sentenced him to death. The sentence is death.
Yes.
But they don't have the right to do
Correct.
that. They don't have the right to put anybody to death because they are not the
They're not. They're being
rulers.
occupied. They're not
They're
the rulers.
occupied.
They're an occupied territory.
So they have to go and convince the Romans to put him to death.
Yep.
And the Romans are probably, well, we'll get there in a second.
Yep.
Okay, so, and then some of them were spitting on him. They blindfold his eyes and then they start saying, who hit you? Prophesy. And the guards were punching and slapping him.
That's not really loving your neighbour, is it?
No.
This is the irony of it, is that they have actually done the whole thing. And all of this is what Jesus is rebuking them for doing. This is the rot of the temple coming to the surface. And it's actually the rot that will take his life. Well, he will surrender his life because of that rot. But the rot is what causes it.
And the story sort of pauses here.
Back outside.
Yeah. What did you say?
Back outside. Meanwhile.
Back outside.
Back
yeah.
outside.
Meanwhile, yeah. I thought you said as a back and
No,
side.
back outside.
Okay. Yeah, we learn about Peter's fate.
Yep.
Or what happens to Peter. He denies Christ 3 times and then the rooster crows
Yep.
and then he realizes he's quite obstinate, isn't he? during this.
He curses and swears.
Curses Jesus. Yeah, he swears. Yeah.
Yeah.
Peter gets really nervous
I-
in verse 71.
Blah, blah, blah. Don't know the man.
Swore. I never laid eyes on the man you're talking about. But they recognize him because he sounded Galilean or he looked Galilean. I don't know if they sounded any different.
Different accent, yep.
Different accent. You know, and then the rooster crows twice. You'll deny me 3 times. And he collapses in tears. As a young child, and pretty much most of my life, I always thought he was hypnotized.
Hypnotized? Why?
Because when Jesus says, you will deny me 3 times.
Ah, right.
Like in
That
Star
somehow
Wars.
Jesus was putting, these aren't the droids you're looking for. The droids you're looking for.
Yes. These
Right.
are, and I remember I grew up with that, you know,
Wow.
all the Star Wars stuff. And I thought, well, Peter's definitely hypnotized. Because what happens,
He realizes he's done it.
you hear the roast, you will hear a rooster
Used to
crow.
cry. Yeah.
You will wake up.
Okay. It's fascinating.
I confess too many things on here,
awesome.
honestly.
Oh, that's
That
funny.
is what I thought. I was like, well, he's hypnotized because Peter, who
You
I
will
liked
deny
as
me
a
3
child,
times.
Yeah, I liked him because he cut the ear off, you know,
Yeah.
and he was always outspoken. And in
Even-
all the drawings, he was this big kind of muscly, burly,
Right.
hairy
Yeah, gotcha.
man.
Yeah.
So passionate.
Yeah.
He had to be hypnotized.
He wasn't capable of being afraid for his own well-being.
No.
Okay. Fascinating. I like it, Jeanie. It's
Well, it's
interesting.
not being afraid. I could believe he was afraid. could not believe he would deny Jesus.
Right. Well, there you go.
Because if somebody that close to Jesus denies Jesus, then what have I got?
We're back to what we were just saying about the Garden of Gethsemane.
Yep.
But reverse that. If you feel that way, folks, reverse that trend and just see that is Jesus identifying with us. The fact that he is still prepared to go through this and he's prepared to restore Peter after this. He restores him twice. We only see the narrative of one, but there is twice where Jesus is publicly restored. Well, no, privately once and publicly restored from this moment by Jesus himself. Jesus will put up with you. He is gracious no matter how many times you fall.
And 2 things I take from this story: getting older, realizing he wasn't hypnotized; he was just probably
Trying to
doing
save his
exactly
ass.
what I would do. Yes.
Save his donkey.
The 2 things are that in dark times we just often forget the words and presence of Jesus.
Yeah,
We can
that's
forget
great. Yep.
everything, and often we are brought to a place of tears
Mhm.
and recognition of our failure before Jesus is actually able to, as all those wonderful things you were just saying do happen to
Yes.
Peter, will
Yep.
happen to us.
That's it. Very good. So
That's
now
the
we're going to
end.
go on. That's the end of that
14.
chapter. Well done.
One
You
more.
didn't read all of them, but you read lots of them. We'll get there.
Oh,
Chapter
man.
15 coming up.
Chapter 15 starts to talk about time. Now we had conversations about time. Jesus doesn't mess with time, but he suggests that there is a godly time and time is different in the supernatural. Well, here now Mark starts to talk about human time.
Okay.
And he's placing the story in time.
Yep.
At dawn's first light, the high priests they have arranged a conference with the entire council. He's kind of repeating himself a bit here from last one. And they've tied Jesus securely. They take him out and they present him to Pilate. I wonder how Pilate felt being woken up
In the early hours of the morning.
early hours of the
Yep.
morning. And just as he's thinking, oh, we've reached the end of Passover, we're getting to the end,
There hasn't been
nothing's
any
happened.
trouble.
Here's this big knock at the door
Yeah.
and with a bunch of people
Yeah.
out and a guy tied up,
Yeah.
tied securely.
Yeah, exactly.
But there's no mention if they don't retell the story. Often the scriptures will tell the story within the story.
Yes, that's
but
right. They don't in Mark's gospel, no.
No, it's assumed knowledge that Pilate knows who he is,
Yep.
I suppose. And he asks, are you the king of the Jews? We haven't heard that before, have we?
No. Have we heard that before in this gospel? Because this is what the point of the whole gospel is about. Have we heard it before? The title?
I don't think so.
No. I think this is what they're accusing him of, obviously.
So we've had somebody call him the son of David, and now we're having somebody else call him the king of Jews.
Yep, that's right. Yep. But this is the point. This is the gospel that's focusing on Jesus becoming king. It's the NT Wright says that this gospel, Mark, is about the enthronement of Jesus as king on the cross. So bear that in mind.
Servant to king.
Servant to king. Bear that in mind as we read this narrative over the next couple of minutes. Remember that this
Couple of minutes.
Okay.
We're going to be here for an hour.
Hopefully not that long. Let's read this narrative through seeing everything that's taking place here as the enthronement. Mark wants you to think of this as Jesus being anointed and enthroned as king. Okay, let's leave it there and we'll just come back to that.
Okay. So what we had before were the Jews were planning to kidnap and kill Jesus, but not at Passover.
Not at Passover.
Then we've had Judas come and say, hey, I'm going to get him. And now what we have is we realize now that the Pharisees and all of these leaders have it better than they could have expected. Because now they're not just going to kill and kidnap, they're going to have a public
execution.
A public destroying of this
Yep.
beloved man.
Yep. And they're hoping that it'll all get done and dusted before everyone wakes up in the morning.
And the blood is not going to be on their hands, as they say.
No, that's right. They can blame the Romans for it.
Blame the Romans.
Because now they're going to find a grounds. They're trying to find a grounds to accuse him to Rome.
Yeah. So they found the grounds. They found the blasphemy, and now they need to find.
They have to find Roman legal grounds.
Roman legal grounds.
Which one are they going for?
Yes. So it's Roman approved judgment.
Yep. And so the grounds, the charge of blasphemy, that's a Jewish charge.
Yes.
It's not a Roman one.
No, they need a new charge.
The charge of claiming to be a king is a grounds of, a crime against Rome. So that's where they're coming. They're going, we found this man claiming to be the king of the Jews. That's enough for Pilate to sit up and take notice.
Yeah. And Jesus actually answers this question and says, if you say so, Pilate. And then the high priest let loose a barrage. Oh, man, I'm really losing it now. Of accusations. And Pilate asks him again, aren't you going to answer anything? It's quite a list of accusations, but still Jesus says nothing. And Pilate was really impressed that he says nothing. And then it mentions here there was a custom of the feast to release a prisoner, anyone the people asked for. And there was this guy called Barabbas who was locked up. He'd been locked up with the insurrectionists who had committed murder during the uprising against Rome. Wait a minute. But the uprising against Rome. So this guy has done everything that they're accusing Jesus of doing.
That's right. They are accusing Jesus of being launching an uprising against Rome. And he hasn't done because he said, render unto Caesar what belongs to Caesar.
Yes. All right.
This guy was actually a revolutionary. He was a zealot.
That's an interesting point.
Interesting point
in the story.
And his name is Barabbas or Barabba. What does that mean? What's the word bar mean?
He likes to rob bars.
Do you know what bar means? It's like Mc in Scottish. What is Mc short for in Scottish?
I don't know.
MacDonald?
Yeah.
Means son of Donald.
Son of Donald.
Mc is bar in Hebrew.
Oh.
Is son of.
Okay.
Joseph Bar Judah.
Oh, now I know when you put it like that. All right.
Barabbas, Abba, father. He is the son of the father.
I never saw that. Never saw that.
No, interesting.
Thank you. All right. So Pilate, they start to position.
So one son of the father.
One son
is about to take a substitute for another son of the father, and we are to see ourselves. We've just seen that we are to see ourselves in those that ran away and have committed treason against the father, and so in the sense, Barabbas is going to be substituted by Yeshua, God saves, and we are the Barabbases.
Yes,
so
I get that.
We are missing our cross because Jesus is taking our cross. He is substituting himself when we should be the Barabbas.
I wondered about his name, but I never looked into it.
There you go.
What is wrong with me? You've got to look into these things.
You've got to dig it up. But we are that, and Jesus is substituting himself. He is the lamb. He's the substitute lamb.
Okay, so a question. Where are the people who liked him at this point? Or it's still too dark?
I think it's still too early in the morning at this point.
Okay.
Yeah.
So they're using this dark time in the morning to
they want to get
all
it
this
done and dusted before the crowds wake up. Yeah.
It's happening very quickly.
And Passover's a late night. This is still a public holiday, so because sundown happens, their Passover starts at sundown.
And we know they're drinking wine.
We know they're drinking wine. They've had a big night. It's a party. It's a celebration. So they're probably
still
not
could
rising.
be people awake.
There would be a few, but they're not. The crowds aren't up yet.
Okay, all right.
This says it's very early in the morning. It says,
but
so
here it says
6 o'clock in the morning.
A crowd is coming. as
Yeah.
the crowd came up and began to present its petition for him to release a prisoner. Pilate anticipated them. Do you want me to release the king of the Jews? And Pilate knows by that time it was through sheer spite that the high priest had turned Jesus over to him. But the high priest by then work up the crowd.
Yeah.
Remember how they were so worried about the crowd before? It's like finally they figured out how to manipulate the crowd,
Yep.
or at least this kind of crowd.
Yeah.
Because the people who may have
Been up early in
followed
the morning.
him,
Yep. Those.
or the people who may have appreciated his miracles may not have turned against him. But this kind of crowd,
Yep.
they're
Yeah,
turning
and
against
I
him.
wonder if I've never really thought about this, but I wonder if part of the rhetoric it says there's not a massive crowd. We're not talking about all the crowds here. It's early in the morning. We know that he's telling us that. I wonder if that gives the voice of the leaders a bit more sway in the mix, and I can sort of see them walking through the crowd going, "He said he was your king. Now look at him. How can he be the king? He's about to be killed. How can he be the one? He mustn't be the one." And that's whipping them into a frenzy, going, "Yeah, he's let us down. He's disappointed us. We expected him to be the king, overthrowing Rome, and here he is at the mercy of Rome." And that would be enough to get a few of them disappointed and discouraged by that.
Because this is the same town where Jesus entered, remember?
Yeah, just a
on
week
the
before.
donkey, on the colt, and then nothing happened. He
Yep.
left. So
Yep.
they would have been the same crowd of people expecting the Messiah, and then
That's right. And
nothing
they're
happened.
disappointed. Yeah, so
Disappointed.
I can see why it's easy for the religious people to whip the leaders to
Yeah.
whip the crowd into a
And
frenzy.
also for the crowd to go with the religious leaders because they don't want their lives ruined.
No, they don't want
They
their
don't
lives
want to
ru-
be turned out of
And
the temple.
They just expected Jesus to come and do a military takeover. And they think, well, that hasn't worked. But hang on, you're offering us a guy who did try and do a military takeover for nothing. You offered to have
Yes.
us back. We'll take him. Thanks very much.
Yes, yeah, that's
Maybe he
right.
could be what we thought Jesus was going to be.
Yeah, he's going to come out of prison. He's going to
Start all over again.
Yeah, start all over again. He's already got followers. Obviously, the crowd are going to love him.
Yep.
Yeah, they want him to be the fake Messiah.
That's
sort of
right.
that Jesus was just
That Jesus
talking
was
about.
talking about. Yep, you got it.
Oh wow!
It all
Okay.
ties together.
It all ties together. Yes, you're right. And so here they're whipping him into the friendly, and they say, "No, we want Barabbas. We don't want Jesus. We want Barabbas." And Pilate comes back, "But what am I going to do with this killing of the Jews?" And they yell out, "Nail him to a cross."
Yep, crucify him.
Aren't they loving their neighbor?
No.
But Pilate objects in this encounter. He objects, but for what crime? So Pilate isn't completely innocent here because he still allows the Jews to have their own way. But they yelled all the louder, "Nail him to a cross."
Yep.
And Pilate gave the crowd what it wanted because he didn't want to get in trouble by his bosses either. He
Exactly.
wanted the crowd to just disperse.
Yep, this was already had a reputation. Jerusalem had a reputation for being a thorn in the side of the Romans. It wasn't.
Yes.
It wasn't the sort of place where you got. It wasn't a promotion to get appointed as governor of Judea.
No.
And so he is under strict orders to keep peace.
And wasn't it like the only one in the entire Roman kingdom at that time that they couldn't actually control?
Yeah, they
It
actually.
kept causing problems.
That's why they let him
problems.
get away with worship. That's why the Jews are allowed, of all the nationalities in all of the Roman Empire, were allowed to worship their own god and not worship the pagan gods. Because the Romans got to the point where they went, actually, it's not worth the trouble. Let's just keep the peace. As long as we can give the rich people, the elites, tell them to offer a few offerings for Caesar, a few prayers for Caesar, let them have their way. But even then, they're still causing an uprising. And so I wouldn't have wanted to be Pilate in this situation. And he's not innocent by any stretch of the imagination. You're right, he's not innocent. But he's doing his best to uphold justice. And in the end, he probably is afraid that the crowds are going to riot the other way now. They were worried. The religious leaders were worried that the crowds would riot if they crucified him or if they killed him. Now Pilate's worried the crowds will riot if they don't kill him. So
Yeah.
Pilate's trying to keep the peace. And the other narrative tells a story of Pilate's wife has a dream.
Yes.
And he washes his hands and says, "This isn't on me, this is on you." And
I like that version.
yeah, and it's actually the Jewish people go, yeah, let his blood be on our head and
Yeah.
our children's head.
It's not in this version.
It's not in this version, no.
No. And that question, "Are you the king of Jews?" The king of the Jews is so loaded, isn't it? It's a trick question because if he says yes, then he's in trouble with Pilate.
Yep.
But if he says no, he's lying.
Yes, that's right.
All
yep,
right.
exactly.
Okay. So here,
And he actually does say, well, you said it. He doesn't deny that he's the king of the Jews.
sorry, were you going to say something?
Well, John's gospel, he says, "Are you the king of the Jews?" And he actually does say he's a king. He says, "My kingdom is not of this place. For if it were, my disciples would have come and rescued me. But now my kingdom is from another place." And Pilate goes, "So you're a king then?" He goes, "Yes, I am a king. And for this purpose I came into the world." And he explains why he's the king of the Jews. But then at the end of that, Pilate goes, this man doesn't deserve death.
Yeah.
He's not the kind of king Rome's worried about. He goes back out and says to them, not the king I'm worried about. And they cry out, the crowd go out and go, anyone who claims to be a king is no friend of Caesar. So basically they put the ball back in his court and say, this will be on your own head if you don't kill him. So Pilate was trying to do justice.
He was trying to do
while
justice.
he was motivated by fear of the problem responsibilities if he didn't keep the peace.
He still whipped him when he didn't have to.
Well, once he hands him over to crucifixion, that's the next process. At that point, it becomes whipping. So he says he ordered Jesus flogged with a lead tip and turned him over to the Roman soldiers.
Is that to make it go quicker?
No, I just think that's part of the process.
Part of it.
Part of the process of flogging, of crucifixion would have been whipping.
Often they didn't survive that too.
Oftentimes they didn't survive that, yeah.
So the soldiers take Jesus into the place called Praetorium or whatever, something there.
Praetorium, yep.
And the entire brigade is there apparently, and they dress him up as a king with a purple robe.
What did we say about the king?
Yeah.
Purple robe.
Purple robe. Thorn
Crown.
brush on his head, the crown, yes. And bravo, King of the Jews, they mock him. And they bang him on the head with a club, spit on him. It's so brutally written. Spit on him and knelt down in mock worship. After they had their fun, they took off the purple cape, put on his own clothes back on them, and they marched him out to nail on a cross.
So that is his, coronation.
That's his coronation.
They've dressed him up. They've bowed down before him. They put a crown on him. That is, Mark wants you to see that is his coronation. Not the coronation you'd expect.
Yeah.
But nonetheless, if he's going to be a king, he needs to have a coronation. That's what that was.
That's why it's written in there. Yeah. Yep. Okay. I didn't see that, but I must admit I still find this confronting. Hard
It's incredibly confronting.
So I kind of glossed over it. I have no notes or questions on this part.
Are you a bit like that with The Passion of the Christ? You can't watch it because of the...
Oh, no, I like that.
You like that?
Yeah, because that's
Mel
a visual
Gibson Yes, but Mel Gibson went out of his way to be far more realistic to what we're reading here than most of the other Jesus movies have been. I mean, it'll be interesting to see what Dallas Jenkins does when the time comes in a few years, because Mel Gibson's was more real in the level of gore, and that's why it had an MA rate. What does it have? An R rating in the United States because of the level of violence that it had. You
know what? It could have also just been Mel Gibson's love of torture and gore that he has.
I'll give him the benefit of the doubt. He's not perfect, but he's trying to...
wonderful director.
Yeah.
Great visionary.
Don't forget, he was the one who hammered the cross into Jim Caviezel himself, hammered the nail into him. Did that scene with a hammer because he saw himself in that. That's what he said anyway. He saw himself as the Romans crucifying. He realised Jesus was going to the cross for his sin.
Oh, good on you, Mel. All right.
Okay, carry on.
Okay. So I did have the question to ask you, why that? And you answered it.
The coronation, okay?
Yeah, perfectly. So then the verse 21 to 29, or 39, is the crucifixion. And it mentions a man here walking along, and he actually carries his cross for him because Jesus seems to be quite beaten that he's not able to.
Yep.
Is that right?
That's right, yep.
Yeah. And then they bring him to Golgotha, which means Skull Hill, and they offer him a painkiller, and he turns it down. I always wondered why he turned it down.
Why do you think?
I don't know.
Could it be because Jesus wanted to not dull the pain?
I just see it as a placebo anyway. Like, surely they didn't have the medicine we had.
But they did use that.
Yes, I know.
So that was what they used it for.
But if I'm willing to think he's hypnotized, I'm willing to think this is a placebo.
I think it's intended. It's the narrative is telling us that Jesus didn't dull the pain at all. Yeah. He went through it all. He endured it all for us, so that there wouldn't be any legal grounds for the devil to say, "Oh, you just copped out of that." He took the whole brunt of it.
Well, he had to, because people will experience pain like that as well.
And, yes, that's the point I'm trying to make. Yep,
yeah,
exactly.
Okay. Yeah. Then they nailed him to a cross. It's quite simply written. And they divided up his clothes, and they threw dice to see what would get them, which is answering that prophetic thing from, do you know where that comes from?
What do we say? Zechariah? Was it Zechariah? No, that wasn't the one. Hang on. Threw dice. Hang on.
I do wonder though, why did they
cross-referencing.
want his clothes if they were
Psalm
covered in
22.
blood?
It's the Messianic
Psalm
Psalm
22.
22. Psalm 22, Psalm 110 are both very
Oh,
Messianic
I'm glad you said Psalm 22 because I'm
Yep.
about to ask you about that.
Psalms. Okay.
Well, actually, I'm going to ask you a question that you're going to answer with that.
Mm-hmm.
I think you are.
Okay.
I hope you are. Or maybe I've got it wrong.
Find out.
Okay. They divided his clothes up and they nailed him at 9 o'clock. Look at this time. So it's gone from 6 till 9 o'clock.
Yeah, I'm only guessing 6. It just says very early in the morning, so it could be 5. But this is
Dawn. Yeah.
it's taken a bit of time. Bear in mind that by 9 o'clock in the morning, Jesus
Crowds.
has been awake for over 24 hours on top of everything else. So has his disciples, apart from sleeping in the garden. But Jesus has already, the exhaustion factor is already high. Yeah, it just adds
to my
another
guilt.
dynamic to it. Exactly. It adds another
Okay.
dynamic to this thing.
So they put up the sign above his head, the King of the Jews, and they crucified 2 criminals with him. It doesn't mention anything about any conversation in Mark. There's 2 criminals next to him, and people were bragging. People passed along the road jeering, shaking their heads in mock lament. You bragged you could tear down the temple. Look how the gossip, how the noises,
Word's
has
gotten
gone
out.
through. Yeah,
That Jesus that was going to save us, he hasn't. In fact,
because
he's
they
on a cross.
love the temple. They love it, don't they?
Yeah. Yep.
And then you're going to rebuild it in 3 days. Show us your stuff. Save yourself. If you're really God's son, come down from that cross. More signs asked for here.
Yep.
And the high priests are there. They're watching them, and they're even yelling in, going, he saved others, but he can't save himself. Messiah is he? Because the Messiah didn't come to save himself.
Nah.
No. King of Israel, then let him climb down from that cross. We'll all become believers then. Even this one says even the men crucified next to him joined in the mockery.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
It's a
this version
different-
doesn't mention the whole thief on the cross thing. No, doesn't mention that the guy that
Yeah.
turned.
Well, perhaps Peter never heard that story.
Perhaps maybe it's just the short. I don't know.
And here we have noon. The sky becomes dark. The darkness lasted 3 hours. And in 3 o'clock, Jesus groaned out of the depths, crying loudly, Eloi, Eloi, lama sabachthani.
Almost. Almost. You got except for the last word.
Sabachthani. How do you say it?
Sabachthani. You said
Sabachthani.
whatever it was. You got one syllable back to front, but that was it.
I thought
You said Salabachthani or Sala, whatever. Anyway, Sabachthani. Yep.
All right, which means, my God, why have you abandoned me? Why did he say that?
He's quoting Psalm 22. Is that the question you were going to ask me?
Yes.
Yes. It's a direct quote from Psalm 22.
Why would he quote Psalm 22? What does that say?
Psalm 22 was at that time, and if you read Psalm 22, you'll see the references. It's one of the most messianic psalms. It's all about Jesus. It's all about the Messiah.
Who says Psalm 22?
Who says Psalm 22? What do you mean? Who says it?
Who wrote it?
Oh, who wrote it?
sings
David wrote it. It's the Psalm of David, isn't it?
Oh,
Yeah.
King David. He writes, and it starts off,
My God, why have you abandoned me? Why are you so far away from me? I call to you all day, you do not answer. Every night I lift up my voice, but I find no relief. You are holy, enthroned on the praises of Israel. Our ancestors trusted in you, and you rescued them. They cried out, and you were saved. They trusted in you and were never disgraced. But I'm a worm, not a man. I'm scorned and despised by all. Everyone who sees me mocks me. They sneer and shake their heads, saying, is this the one who relies on the Lord? That sounds familiar. Let the Lord save him. If the Lord loves him so much, let the Lord rescue him. But you brought me safely from my mother's womb and led me to trust at your mother's breast. I was thrust into your arms at birth, and you have been my God from the moment I was born. Do not stay far from me, for trouble is near, and no one is here to help me. My enemies surround me like a herd of bulls, like lions upon the jaws against me. My life is poured out like water, and all my bones are out of joint. My heart is like wax, nothing melting within me. My strength is dried up. My tongue sticks to the roof of my mouth. Wow, this is so good, isn't it? You've laid me in the dust and left me for dead. My enemies surround me like a pack of dogs, and evil gangs close in on me. They have pierced my hands and feet. I can count all my bones. My enemies snare at me and gloat. They divide my garments among them and throw dice for my clothing. Lord, don't stay far away. You are my strength. Come quickly. Save me from the sword. I will proclaim your name to my brothers and sisters, and I will praise you among the assembled peoples. Praise the Lord, all you fear him. Honor him, all you descendants of Jacob. Show him reverence, you descendants of Israel. I will praise you in the great assembly. I will fulfill my vows, etc., etc., etc. So it's all those verses. It's still got a ways to go. it's all those verses, Psalm 22, that they saw as messianic.
Do you think then when Jesus says, my God, why have you abandoned me? He is not saying that. He's not questioning God. He's actually pointing you back to Psalm 22.
It's called, what's the word? There's a word for it. A remez, I think, is the Hebrew word. Yes, I think that's the case. But I don't, scholars are divided on it. Some think that there was actually a turning away at that point, and that was the point at which the punishment of sin come upon Jesus. We're getting into atonement theories, which you did talked about, no doubt. I'm sure you did that. I haven't read your essay yet, Jeannie, but some scholars would say it's actually him saying that. Others would argue he was saying that to fulfill prophecy, to point them back, to say, look, this is what you need to see. Everything that's happened in Psalm 22, I'm the fulfillment of that. What do you think?
Well, I actually think that.
I probably do too.
Yeah, because it is very clear and descriptive about all the things that just happened.
Yes, yeah.
And I think it's him saying, I am the Messiah, I am the King of Jews. Yeah. And asking, but he's also engaging your intelligence and your ability to read, to recall to mind, and to look further.
Talk about rhetorical devices. We've talked about that a lot today. That whole idea of planting a scripture that seems seemingly out of context in the New Testament writers, and then they don't want you just to look at that scripture. They expect you to go back and look at the rest of the chapter that scripture references. That was just a common rhetorical. It's a bit like what you were saying about the fig tree. What do you call it? A seed? What did you call it?
Set up and pay off.
Set up and pay off.
No, that's not about discovering further. That's about implying or setting up what's going to happen later on in the story.
But it's a similar concept in that they're planting something that will automatically load up all this other stuff in your mind, and you've actually got to go back and think through everything you've already learned, because that's going to illuminate. That's like a hyperlink back. It's a click link back. It's what it's trying to tell you to do. It's clickbait. Let's use that term. It's clickbait.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay, that's an easy one to understand.
Yeah.
Okay, so here it goes on. Then people listening to him say, look, he's calling out for Elijah. And then they offer him some more sour wine and give it to him to drink. And they say, let's see if Elijah comes to take him down. This is now the third or fourth time that Elijah's come up in the book of Mark.
Yes, very common.
Yeah.
Yep.
And then Jesus, with a loud cry, gave his last breath. And at that moment, the temple curtain ripped right down the middle. When the Roman captain standing guard in front of him saw that he had quit breathing, he said, this has to be the Son of God.
So every other person throughout the narrative of the book of Mark, who is this man? It's a Roman centurion overseeing his crucifixion that tells you who he is.
Tells you who he is, but why does he only realize who he is when he's dead?
I think it's
declare that he is God when he's dead.
I think it's it says when the Roman officer stood here and saw how he died and saw all the surrounding things, the darkness and all of the stuff that's taking place, that's what's captured him, I think.
But why would God be dead? How could God die?
How could God die?
How could this man admit this was God dead?
That's a good question.
Why is God dead?
God's not dead. That'd be a good name for a movie.
But isn't that what he's saying?
Yeah.
Here he is. He stopped breathing. This has to be the Son of God.
Yeah, well, that's the opposite of what they would expect. Gods don't die.
Yes.
Yeah. Gods don't die. Okay, no, I've not thought that through in that much depth. Have you?
No, because I just look at it and I go, well, how could he's admitting there is a weakness or not. He's recognizing that God has taken upon himself the weakness of humanity. Is he? I don't really know.
Well, we don't know anything about this Roman centurion. And people have nearly every fictional book I've ever read about Jesus and the cross, or we've got a Roman centurion, Quintus, who is not Quintus, in The Chosen, who is obviously going to, there from the beginning of the story, and he's obviously going to be this one. That's pretty normal throughout the narrative, but we don't know anything about this Roman officer. But I'm thinking a son of God to a Roman officer could be, to a Roman pagan, the concept of the sons of the gods were humans that had mated with the gods, or the gods had children.
The demigods.
The demigods.
Okay.
I wonder if that's the perspective, because the demigods could die.
That's a Greek thing, though.
Well, Romans and Greeks the same. Romans just adopted Greek mythology
Yeah,
and just
they
gave them
did.
different names. So I wonder if maybe his understanding of it is shaped on pagan understanding.
Okay,
I don't know. Look, it would be a fascinating study. There'd be a lot to uncover in that statement because it's the pivotal statement in Mark's gospel. And I've known that, and I've noticed the reference to him being the king and sort of like his final statement, we're wondering who he is. But I've not gone beyond that. There's obviously more to it than that.
Because he could have said it when Jesus called out, my God, why have you abandoned me? He could have said it then.
He could have said it then.
At any point. But he says it when he's
When
taken
he's-
his last,
when
when,
he's
he
taken-
had quit breathing, when
Yeah.
he is dead.
Yeah.
This has to be the Son of God.
Yeah, it just says, when the Roman officer who stood facing him saw how he had died. Interesting. Don't know. Something about his death that's different.
I have to come back to that.
Yeah, I think I will have to as well. I think
When
I've got
he
to
had
that point where I
stopped-
thought I knew the story, but there's another whole layer of meaning that's hidden there
Yeah.
that I haven't seen yet.
I knew that because I could see the look in your eye. I was like, oh, I'm going to get you on
You
this
got me
one.
on that one. Yeah, there's
I've got
more-
a question
It's
for
really
you.
good. It's a great question.
So in verses 40 to 47, we have Jesus taken to the tomb. We know that Joseph of Arimathea, who was a highly regarded, respected member of the Jewish council, who
Yeah.
was possibly at the trial for Jesus,
Most likely.
would have been there.
Yep.
He came. He'd been searching for them, waiting expectantly on the lookout for the kingdom of God. He comes and he plucks up the courage to ask for the body for Pilate, and Pilate can't believe he's dead already.
Yeah.
And they take the body and they wrap it in whatever clothes.
Ready for
Yeah,
sheet.
and
sheet
they
of
put
linen
the
cloth.
stone over. What's interesting about this little this part of the chapter is it's introducing the women, which we haven't actually had before.
No,
He's
they haven't
never
been in the
talked about the
story.
women
No,
at all,
no.
and suddenly they're going
They're front and center in the story now, aren't they?
Yeah, and because women weren't, there wasn't much value placed on women, and now they're going to be integral to the eyewitness accounts of telling
that's
the
so cool.
story. So let's just add them in here. Oh, here we have a person, Mary Magdalene, Mary the mother of a younger James and Joseph and Salome, and it just talks about how these women followed and served him. It's
Yep.
like
Oh, by the way, this is all
adding
happening
all this
along
in,
the side. Yeah.
adding this in, and they were watching, and then in verse 47, Mary Magdalene, Mary and the mother of Mary the mother of Joseph. Who's Joseph?
I think so. It says Mary, the mother of Joseph here. I think there's a lot of. I sat down one time years ago and tried to compare all the Marys together and work out who they all are, and I realised that it's a rabbit warren trying to piece them all together. But this one's probably Jesus' mother
Okay,
because
They-
James, Joseph, Judas, and Simon
they watched the burial,
they watched the burial.
and we know that all the other disciples cut and run.
That's right. It's the
And-
women that are left here.
And interestingly, Peter, who had already been crying, and he had remembered that he had
he's not here.
abandoned. He doesn't turn up.
No.
No. James later on, and he says he's there, but there's no mention of that because Peter's not going to say that
Because
James was there.
Peter's not going to say anything about it. Yep.
And so it's only the women coming to watch, the women and the mockers.
Yep.
He's completely abandoned.
Yes, that's right. Yep, his disciples have left him and they're hiding for fear of the Jews.
Yeah, that's the end of that chapter. And then I'm not going to take...
You're not going to do chapter
do
16,
chapter 16,
are you?
but what I've
Pastor
no,
Jeff's going to
Pastor
talk about
Jeff.
the resurrection.
and I love that chapter 16 doesn't end. I mean, sorry, it ends abruptly,
Yeah.
and then it's almost like the story was never finished.
Yeah, well,
And
there's a whole
someone
section that's been
comes
added in
and adds.
later.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah,
I don't know what happened to John Mark, but he gave up writing on verse 8. Yeah.
He gave up writing on verse
Who
8.
knows? Who
Well,
knows?
That's interesting. There's
Uh,
actually there's actually 3 different endings to Mark.
But what he did, though, is he left it hanging. He left me
Yeah.
hanging,
Yeah.
wanting to know more. And I've been quite impressed by this gospel, the way he has weaved the story, the way he has raised the question, the way he manipulated my emotions, and brought me to a point where I was really confronted with the story.
Let me ask you now, do you like Mark now then?
I think I might.
You think you might like Mark?
I think I might.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's changed?
Well, I loved the fig tree. I loved the that he was using these examples. Obviously, Jesus is using these examples, but Mark chose stories to add or not add. But he has woven this together. He has shown Jesus to be a very deep, insightful person who uses scenarios to tell greater scenarios, and he uses natural world to expose the supernatural. He uses the physical to take down the opposite, the spiritual. Yeah. And is constantly cutting through, like asking you to go deeper and deeper. And he's in his writings, it's like you can't read it on first value. You have to, what you were talking about before, dig, and dig and dig and dig. And eventually, I don't think you'll ever get to the bottom because there's so many more diggings to go.
And that is normal, healthy way to read the Bible. We tend to shallow it up, but that's not the way the ancient writers wrote. They wrote with incredible creativity and depth and hyperlinks and all those other words we've used, all these different rhetorical devices. And that's what part of the reason I love the Bible, because I can mine its riches. And hopefully we can help people to see that that's there and inspire you to go mining for those riches. We've left a few things open-ended, like that whole thing around, the Son of God right there. There's a minefield, a whole lot of riches down there lying under the surface, which I'm sure we could dig up. Someone could go and dig them up and enjoy that and make that a project for the next little while, and you'll learn so much.
Yeah, the book really appeals to your intellectual side, to your emotions, to everything as you go deeper. And if before we did this, I always pictured this book to be brown.
Yeah, you said brown, simple.
It was brown.
Yeah.
But now I see it as soil brown with loads of little seeds in it and a fig tree.
Oh, lovely. I like it.
Yeah,
that's clever.
How I see it.
Yeah, very clever. See what you did there?
So I'm impressed, John Mark.
Well done.
I am.
Well done. Great stuff. All right. Well, are we done?
Yeah. Thanks so much for listening to us.
Thank you, everybody. That was great. We've hit about 3 hours nearly.
Oh, my gosh.
You can have a few weeks off. You're back for the last one of Revelation about 5 weeks from now or something.
Yes, I am.
But you're off for a few weeks.
Yes.
All right. Well, thanks.
Enjoy the break, people.
That's great. Jeanie always hear positive things about you. Someone said to me from Picton the other day, "Oh, I love it when Jeanie's on."
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah. So she's always got so much content.
Oh,
she's
that's really nice.
Thought through.
That's encouraging because I do wonder. Oh, I sound like such an idiot on here. Anyway, like an idiot with a desire to learn, maybe.
Oh no, you don't come on like an idiot. I think it was Leonie, but I think it was Leonie that said that. I just didn't want to.
Thanks, Leonie.
No worries. All right, everybody. God bless. We'll talk to you on the next episode.
All right. See ya.